Okay, it's
I was on time.
it's 2:30. Okay, it's 2:30, and we have a quorum.
First Democrat.
First, I'm passing around the lovely card we got from Janet, thanking us for the flowers, and again our condolences.
I think
She
she just
stepped
stepped
She
out.
stepped out.
But just want to pass around the card from Janet. It was quite beautiful. Did you want to make an introduction?
We do. Are we on the introductions?
Well,
Okay. Well, Jessica White, I would like to introduce to you all. Jessica is our new, she's got a very long title. It's Voter Services Program Evaluation and Compliance Manager. So she's taking on the role that Betty Ann Lucy had previously held, supervising all of our voter services section. That would be voter registration, it would be absentee, it would be the front counter. But she's also got a heavy data-oriented skill set that she's coming in, and she's going to be taking over responsibility for our county stat, state of Montgomery, a lot of our sort of analytics work, which you will see on display a little later when we get into some of these issues. Jessica is a former assistant election commissioner out in Johnson County, Kansas, and we lucked into snapping her up and having her move to the East Coast to join us here. So we're very excited to have her here. And did you want to make any kind of preliminary statements, anything?
Well, I thank you all for welcoming me here, and I'm glad to be here. Looking forward to being at this meeting.
Jessica, why don't you tell them about the size of Johnson County and number of registered voters so they don't think you're out there with just cows.
Just cows.
And your last name?
White.
Okay, thank you.
So Johnson County is about 500 square miles, so very similar size-wise, square miles-wise to Montgomery County. We had about 375,000 registered voters, and we were the largest county in Kansas and the largest jurisdiction in 4 states. It was a little bit unique in Johnson County because we administered elections at every level, all the way down to city, municipality, water districts, and the election law in the state of Kansas covered and was uniform for all levels of government. So that's the reason we conducted it. There was 39 elections conducted during my time with Johnson County, 9 last year alone. So I've been through presidential cycles, several gubernatorial cycles, and lots of special elections, and we also did some special elections by mail ballots. So that may be on the horizon here as well. So
well, welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Okay, did Janet come back now?
Yes.
Oh, Janet, yeah, I passed around the card, which was lovely. Thank you, and again, we express our condolences.
Thank you.
But in coming to the meeting, I'm sure it'll take everything.
It'll take it all.
Yeah, this will. Yeah. Anyway, did everybody see the card?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Okay. So let's begin with the approval of minutes from the last board meeting, January 11th, 2016. Do I have a motion to approve?
Yes, a few seconds.
Is a motion to approve?
No, a few seconds just to go over everything.
Yeah, no, but we'll have discussion.
I would move approval with the changes that I sent to everybody.
Okay.
I second.
Let me just. I had a couple of comments.
I guess I'll second. You need a second for the
No,
motion?
he seconded.
Okay.
Oh, you seconded. I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
Okay, on page 3, what David, you recommended that of the bylaws come out where it says right above personnel.
Yeah, that wasn't actually said at the meeting.
Did I say that? I don't
No,
recall.
You did not.
That's what I meant.
Everything that I did was based on what was on the recording.
That was the intent of my remarks.
You
That
can add it.
I don't know. I defer to the board that's been here before. Can we add language that's not on the tape?
The minutes typically, you don't add things that didn't happen, but if it was understood,
Well, that's what I meant. I mean, that we were acting, the majority was acting under our interpretation of the existing bylaws.
the only thing I would say, just for your own benefit, is that I believe the issue is about what the state law said. So to say that it was based on a misinterpretation of the bylaws, someone could say that you were looking in the wrong place. That's up to you. I don't feel that strongly about it, but it's not what you said.
No, okay, but I agree. But from the majority point of view,
Well, I think it was a combination of state law and the bylaws, but I think it's certainly true to say that it was an interpretation of the bylaws that you were relying on, so that's fine.
Anybody else have any comments on that?
Well, I think you know what the intention and in terms of the discussion and everything that around it. I certainly defer to the speaker. I think we have in the past on these things.
I mean, I'd like to keep it in because that was the intent of what I meant, you know.
Okay, we keep it.
Okay. All right, we'll keep that. And then on page 6, there's a recommend in the middle of in the middle of the third paragraph, not the middle, but there's a sentence. She added that information technology concerns.
That's what was said at the meeting.
Right.
I personally object to suggesting that we were told something broader than what we were told. That's what was said to me.
Was it said, did Margaret say that the concerns expressed were not isolated to just information technology? I know there's a
I was reporting on, I believe, the meeting in December that legislature DeWitt reported, and DeWitt expressed concerns about things that were outside of information services. But
you have this?
I think the issue would be what you said to us. Because we obviously weren't at the meeting. And I believe, admittedly it's been a few days since I listened to the recording, but I believe that this is based on what you said to us. What you said to us was that there were information technology concerns. Maybe someone else listened to the recording more recently than I did, or listened to this particular section. But the fact that you say that there was a particular kind of concern at the meeting, and then it turns out that the meeting had broader concerns, what we were told is obviously an important function of the minutes. And I believe what we were told was that there were information technology concerns.
well, I haven't had an opportunity to re-listen to the board minutes, so I'm not really going to quibble about this.
If I may.
Sure.
It might be advantageous. Lisa did not have an opportunity to listen to that portion of the tape specifically, and I recall the conversation in general that Margaret was briefing on concerns, some of which were information technology and some may have not been. She may have used the word information technology and then not specified anything else, but I'm wondering if it might be beneficial if the board does not want to accept it the way it's proposed, to wait until we can actually listen to the tape.
Let's just move on. Okay, let's just move on. Let's just adopt these minutes and get going. We have so many things that have to be covered between now and April 26th.
Thank you.
Okay, there was one other thing on page 8. My recollection, the discussion was that this was only for the general presidential election only.
The word presidential was not stated.
Why don't you just say the 2016 general election?
That wasn't stated either.
But when you say general election, that means presidential. Otherwise, we would say primary
No,
election.
the general election for 2018 is a general election too. And again,
But we are talking right now 2016 before 2018.
right, in
though.
which case the context is clear without putting in the word that wasn't said at the time.
I mean, when we talk about general election, we are talking about this election. We are not talking in the future. God knows what happened tomorrow. Maybe I dropped it 2017. I'm saying that anything happens.
So, Margaret, you're saying that the request for the extra scanners only applies to the presidential election?
The county legislative priorities, which is what this board requested, are only for the general election for 2016. That is the only thing that was being discussed.
Yeah, I recall that because it's not applying to the primary, is what
That's
what
it's
it meant.
not going
Yeah.
to apply to the 2018 elections. There's only one thing that's being discussed, the general election of 2016.
So at least in fiscal year 17.
It will be in fiscal year 17, that is
Okay.
correct.
So the
I
recommendation is
propose
to
we add
keep it.
general general election, if you want to make it more clear, say 2016 general election, if that would.
Either that or presidential, either word.
Presidential,
Well, but then presidential
presidential.
also implies that it might be available again in 2020, and it sounds like we don't know that it will be.
Can we just say general election of 2016?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yes.
presidential election,
Okay.
2016.
let's do that, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Presidential general election 2016 or
No, no, no.
2016?
The 2016
General election,
general election.
20.
2016 general, right. So any other comments on these minutes? All those in favor, as we've discussed? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. Okay. Okay, in terms of the agenda tonight, I was reminded that at the last meeting, there was some discussion about having a nightly meeting in March. So we're going to put that under, I guess, new business?
Yes, that's where I have it scheduled.
Okay, and we're going to add, because of what the State Board of Elections just did, we're going to be discussing later equipment allocation under Roman numeral 8C. We're going to add, and paper ballot allocation, because that's a hot new issue for us. Okay?
Mr. President, do we have to enumerate if we want to discuss an issue under new business, or do
No.
you just open it up?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
because
fine.
And
No.
also under equipment allocation, if there's something there we want to discuss, I can
Yeah.
just bring it up.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now, any public comments, Margie?
No, were there, did I lose on?
No public comments? Okay. And I want to welcome Barbara and Dolly. Good seeing you both. Okay. Margaret, your election director report?
Okay, personnel, Allison did already officially introduce Jessica White. So that has been accomplished. We have continued to hire temporaries, I believe. We had 2 more come into voter services to help processing. And that's really all I have about the personnel budget.
Okay. Sent to you in advance was the latest update on the budget. You will note that there was a little bit of confusion last month on my part because of a credit that was applied to a line item. So I will draw your attention to line 61926, which is showing a year-to-date expenditure of $2,923.
I'm sorry, can you tell me where that is?
Line 61926.
Oh, I see, 61926, under
Lisa.
Lisa's,
That is the amount that we have spent to date on polling place rentals so far. You will also note that last month that line item was a $11,260 credit, and so you can see this month that has been taken out of there.
right here, this one,
Rentals leases.
Which one?
Not in there.
Rentals leases.
I think.
Oh, thanks.
All right. What that amount was payment from the city of Rockville for our overtime expenses that our staff incurred helping them with their municipal election. And so I also draw your attention to line 50324, which is overtime at the top. And last month that line item was $32,462, and it's now $23,893. So we did a journal entry to move those funds that were erroneously deposited into polling place rentals up to overtime, which is where they should have been credited to. And so these numbers are accurate and current as of February 10th. And I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I guess
Can I
there
say-
are a couple of things.
We did not meet during for a subcommittee meeting, budget meeting, but I did send you an email with some question. Some of the question was answered during when we were meeting with the Leggett and those people. Some other one was election judges. Do you have a copy of that thing? Election judges, the question which we asked.
Well, I'm just wondering with, we had a bunch of other documents that I think come under budget, right?
Yes.
That were sent to us, county billing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to.
Yes, well, we had, Naheed and I had discussed having, we were planning on a budget meeting. Then we talked after our meetings with the council and with the executive, because you prepared so much information for that we thought we could have that broader discussion at this meeting today. What we had been looking for was, can we get a better sense of what we're talking about now in terms of what we're going to be spending? I know you don't have, invoices yet, but we must be pretty close on some. You're shaking your head. Some of these new.
You're talking about FY16 current.
I'm talking about 16.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Yeah, I know you want to discuss paper ballots, and we have no information whatsoever.
You have no idea how much they're going to cost.
I have an estimate that I've been told secondhand, that's not official, that each sheet of paper costs 21.5 cents, but that's really all I can tell you.
Really? Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Isn't it?
How much?
21
21.5.
1.5 cents per
21
sheet.
cents per sheet? Are they making
It's
gold?
it's
That's per ballot,
special
per sheet.
paper
Yeah.
to prevent
Ballots are more.
counterfeiting.
And is that include printing, or it's the whole thing?
I can't
Producing
answer,
it.
I can't answer that question. I think it is the full production.
It is the full production, you said?
I
think it is.
I think it is.
With that price, it should be.
And it's a security component, though, I'm sure.
When do you think we're going to have more definitive numbers? We're getting kind of close here to April.
We have, hopefully this week.
Have they? When will they be printed? Or have they been printed? What's the?
We haven't even received the ballot proofs.
For like 2 months away.
I guess one of the other issues then was in talking in terms of allocation to the various early voting sites, where of course we're going to need so many because we need all the 7 styles. Is that going to be discussed later in the meeting in terms of equipment needs, what you're allocating at each of those sites? Okay, so we can defer
But
that.
not the paper,
Because you don't.
because I don't know. I don't know how much paper they anticipate having us distribute at each of the 10 early voting centers.
Well, doesn't that have to come from us
No.
to them? How do they determine
The state
it?
board determines the equipment allocation and the paper ballot allocation, and they consult with the board staff.
When?
Hopefully soon.
Because I would think we're in a better position to, although anybody, I guess, can look at data in terms of past turnout, etc. But as I always like to recall for people, 5 of these early voting sites have never been used in a presidential. So
Good point.
we're flying a little bit by the seat of our pants.
It's also like the financial advisors say, past performance is not a guarantee of future results.
This is
Yeah,
true.
running out of paper ballots, I thought would be a headline. I've changed my mind. Running out of paper ballots would be a screaming headline. I
That
added the
happened
word
before.
screaming.
That happened
It
before.
wouldn't wait for the next day's paper.
No.
It would be all over the news in every medium you can think of.
Yeah. That would
Well,
be-
and it touches upon another issue, because actually the first time I had experience with our voting system, if you will, or certainly the system similar to it, which was in Fairfax County's special election, guess what? They ran out of the paper ballots. And what they used in its place, of course, was the machine. And having only one of those, that becomes a significant factor in terms of, you talk about lines building up in a heartbeat. We're getting close to needing some really definitive discussions on this.
And staff will be having those definitive discussions with the state board after they give us their formula.
Okay.
When will we be hearing from you?
But as board members, I think we really do have an interest in this, and we're the ones going to be called about it, and you'll be called too. But I think the general public expects the board members to be on top of this.
Is there a secure plan during the election time to move those ballots from one voting place to another if one runs out or runs low?
For early voting or
Let's-
election day?
Let's say early voting.
Well, yes, the staff would, whatever, we have if the state were to follow our plan, we have a reserve. So they would call, let's say when they get down to one pack of 100, as I understand it. But, again, I have not heard this from the state, therefore it's not a fact, is that they're going to be padded into hundreds, okay? So if a early voting site or an election day site gets to the last pack, 100 ballots, then they would call, or their roamer would call and say, precinct 1-1 needs more Democratic ballots or Republican ballots or maybe non-affiliated ballots. And so we would make arrangements to deliver ballots to that location.
Margaret, is it just us who they haven't heard, or is it the whole state?
It's the whole state.
So the idea is that if you run out of one type of ballot, you get a request for one type of ballot and a response for one type of ballot, and then if another type runs out, you get a separate request for that.
Correct.
So we could be running people back and forth with some
But
regularity.
entirely possible, yes.
I guess our roomers will have extra ballots with them, huh? The roomers
If
will.
they will have them, if, it depends how many ballots we're allowed to keep as a reserve.
A lot of unanswered question.
Pardon me?
There's a lot of unanswered
yeah.
question.
There-
They don't know.
They continue to be, yeah. Going back to the budget, the 16th, we're almost 8 months into it now, and I'm wondering, in looking at any of these line items, are there some places that jump out at you where we're probably not likely to be spending between now and end of June the full allotment there, and where we could, perhaps suggest moving some things, or at least looking, to possibly doing that?
Honestly, I don't see any line item that is going to have a lot of overage in it, and certainly we're going to have enough of a deficit because the voting system was not funded, that any line item that we have any little bit of money in is going to automatically be transferred at year end to cover that.
I understand. Yeah, I agree with you at year end, but I mean, as we know, the council and the executive are fully prepared to be paying for those, the equipment that we need to run the election. I'm thinking more in terms of, as you know, we're shortchanged on our ever popular outreach. And generally, when we start looking at these numbers, it's too late in the fiscal year to, move money and do what has to be done. And so I'm just thinking, especially now where we can buy some more time or, get some more ads, print ads, or maybe accommodate another mailing of some sort. If we see this, leaving us the ability to move that money and not have it all get sucked up in the end by something that we know the county's going to pay for anyway. If that makes sense.
I certainly understand what you're saying. I think one of my issues, and Margaret will certainly weigh in on this, these figures are through January 31st. All of our expenditures in this fiscal year, all of our main expenditures are going to be in this last half of the fiscal year. And so to try to project at this point what we're actually going to be spending is very difficult. We don't have all of our temporary personnel on board yet. I certainly expect that we will be using that entire amount for temporary personnel. Our bigger line items always deal with the State Board of Elections. We're certainly going to be spending more than what we have allocated for our State Board of Elections lines. Our office supplies, I anticipate that we are going to be spending almost all of that. I mean, every day I get a request from another portion of the department saying, oh, we just discovered we have to order this. And so all of these changes to the voting system are requiring changes in equipment and materials that we have to prepare. And so I certainly expect that to be projected at full, to be spent at full. Printing costs, we have just begun. I mean, we're gonna go through that.
Oh, I agree.
Mailing costs, again, we're gonna go through that. We have just begun on all of that. And so I truly do not see, as I go through this budget, I have entered into contracts for all of the advertising money.
The advertising is what we'd like to put more to. What about travel and the education, tuition, and training?
Well, a lot of that is going to go, I believe, and I'm going to turn to Margaret on this one, but the Mayo conference is this fiscal year. And that's going to be something that typically the board members all want to go to, and we'll have to send staff.
It's not the required one.
It is not the required one, but typically the board members have wanted to attend, and we will need to send staff to that as well, I would presume.
Which line item is that?
Mary Ann's referring to...
I'm referring to travel, I guess. And,
yeah.
Right, but which one of those two lines is the Mayo conference?
Well,
it's not. Is it local or is it other?
It must be non-metropolitan.
It is local. However, $2,000 doesn't get the board to a conference. And so we always dip into the other education, tuition, and training to cover that because the county has not given us additional funding for the local conference related.
Do we know when and where it's going to be?
Allison?
It's the end of June. I can check the date. I don't remember it offhand.
Do you know where? We don't need specific dates. Just do you know where it's going to be? Is it Ocean
I mean,
City or
sometimes
Western
it's
Maryland?
real, like it was in Prince George's County at one
It's
time.
on the Eastern Shore somewhere.
It's going to be on the Eastern Shore, and it'll be sometime in June. So it'll have to be paid for in advance of that. It is possible, there might be $5,000 in line 64120 that we could move somewhere, but $5,000 frankly isn't worth moving because it'll be used by the budget.
Except $5,000 on top of our 20 in the advertising, it can have some impact there. Because look what we've been able to do with just 20,000, another 5 there. I mean, I'd like you to maybe think about it, look into it and see what you think, okay?
Okay.
The answer to the
Because
question,
while we have time to do it.
I'm sorry, the answer to the earlier question is that it's at the Hyatt Regency in Cambridge, Maryland, June 19th to 22nd.
June what?
19th to 22nd.
Of June. Okay. I guess that's all I have on the budget.
Okay.
Pardon me?
You don't want to
Jim?
change today because we didn't advertise it.
No, because it's still.
Well-
we have other expenses like sample ballot. We may need other.
No, I'm talking about the 5,000 that Margie just mentioned.
But that
We don't
5,000
know
may
the
be needed
5,000.
somewhere else more
Right.
importantly than it's needed.
I don't think anything's more important to us than outreach, though, in terms of the coming election. We requested so much more and got, none of that additional. I would turn to the other members and say, what do you think?
I'm sitting here agreeing with everything you're saying. I think the more money we spend on outreach, even ads and trying to get more PSAs, I think the more we spend, the better it is. Spend well, the better it is.
Well, do we have to make that decision today, or is it something that's...
Well,
It
if you're
depends
going
when
to
you wanna
make,
spend it.
if
The
you're,
election's in April.
If you're
You've
going
gotta
to
buy the
spend it, you
time.
need to make that decision now. Because it's going to take several weeks for whatever media purchase that needs to be made. Margie's going to have to contact these. And I don't, who do you want to who are you directing your message to? Is it going to be English-speaking language? Do you want additional monies for Spanish? Do you want it, what is it that you, what do you want? Do you want us to spend more money sending Huberto's people out to demonstrate the units? I mean, what is it? You're talking about advertising and outreach. They are two separate things.
Well,
do you want outreach or do you want
I say
advertising?
I think we're talking about the advertising because that's where we only have
Can
the
I
20,000.
say something? I had, which I didn't thank him, Alberto, one of the events which we have, over 100 people were there, and they love it because they love to see the actual machine, and he was there from 8 to 1 o'clock, and people had questions. I think if we send them, the crew, educate people about the machine, about the system, is much better than the print.
But we're doing that.
Yeah,
He has a whole huge list
yeah,
of,
but
I mean,
5,000
he's doing a
dollars,
wonderful
you can
job.
do more. You can do more.
But he's
now,
already
especially
doing it.
the paperwork.
I wanted to ask is, do we have to decide right now how every penny is going to be spent
Yeah,
on,
right.
on marketing? Or can we say that we want to put it in marketing and then look at what the marketing plan is?
Well,
Because I'm still not sure, what the breakdown is of the marketing plan. Because
Okay.
5,000, and you seem to use it very well. 20,000, 5,000 is like a third of that, so it could make a fourth of that. So math is never my good
Okay,
subject.
so the money was divided as the board members approved it to be divided, and contracts have been entered into to spend the $20,016 or $20,116. If we wait until March 21st, which is the next board meeting, to make a decision on where you want me to direct that $5,000, I could probably still get additional advertising for early voting and election day, but I would not be able to pull something together for the voter registration deadline piece, which may be sufficient. But there are deadlines. There is time to make sure that they have the information they want in the proper format and to get it out there. So I would certainly prefer an answer today and some direction today. However, if you want to defer it until next month, I can certainly bring back to you the plan that the board approved and how that money has been distributed. And you can certainly add it somewhere else with the understanding that it would go towards advertising early voting and election day, not the voter registration deadline.
Mary Ann, could you clarify what you're actually proposing? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I didn't put it in the form of a proposal, but what I was discussing was moving $5,000 out of what looks like $8,000, almost 8,000 remaining under the education, tuition, and training, and putting it into the advertising. Marketing / sales, where we have 20,000 to spend. This was our whole plan to. I'll put it in the form of a motion because we're discussing it.
I second.
We're discussing it. Let's discuss it.
Okay.
There was an item.
We all agree with it, but then let's discuss it.
What is it that we'll be giving up if we do this?
Well, she was saying this meeting that's coming up in June, one of the Mayo meetings. It's not a required meeting of board members. Every other year, it's an optional meeting, and usually, well, I can only speak for the past 5 years or whatever, but generally, that particular meeting is not attended by all board members or the larger amount of staff that goes to the required meeting that we just had last year.
But
So
We're also leaving $5,000 for that purpose.
No, it won't cost that much.
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Dave?
I happened to be listening to WTOP yesterday where they were doing a public service announcement looking for Republican and unaffiliated judges for Prince George's County. And it occurred to me that literally the very same text that they were using with a different authority line, a different phone number, and a different name could be used for us because I think we have the same the same need for that as well. And
Do you know what station or what time?
it was WTOP. It was roughly between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Beginning of drive time.
Well, but it wasn't drive time because it was yesterday.
Sunday.
It was
Sunday.
It was on.
Oh,
It was on Sunday. But whatever the case, I mean, I didn't know they were obviously that they were doing that. I believe that when we discussed the outreach earlier, that I don't remember all the details, but I thought that there were some types of advertising that we concluded at that time that, given our limited funds, we weren't going to spend. The radio may have been in that category.
It was.
It was.
And it could very well be that if we now have funding to do radio,
I love radio.
that it may make sense to,
That's a good
Well, only if you get that some kind of bang for a buck for even $5,000. Radio can be expensive.
Right, no,
is expensive.
no, agreed.
It would be
Agreed.
interesting to
5,000
call
enough for
PG
radio?
County, Prince George's, and ask them what kind of response they've had from their radio ads.
Well,
Asking for that.
I do know that one of the calls that I made was to WTOP, and again, I did not envision this conversation today, so I'm sorry I don't have the numbers in front of me. But when I asked them about our paying for public service ads on their radio station, basically they laughed at me when I told them how much money I had available. Now, at the time I was talking, I think it was $1,000 or $1,500 for radio, and they said it was just, to do anything, just don't bother. I mean, that's not going to get you anything. It is possible if I went back to WTOP with $5,000, they would be willing to do something for us, and I can certainly make a phone call if that's what the board would
That's
like
a
me
good
to
idea.
do.
But if you're going to run it on WTOP, it has to be during a time that people are listening. It's been my experience working with WTOP, WMAL, WBL, BAL,
Yeah.
that for agencies similar to us, they bury these ads late night, early evening, in the afternoon, between 1 and 3, not when we get a lot of listeners. And if that's the purchase, then I would suggest you examine something else.
Well, at the risk of sort of speaking out of turn past my direct knowledge of what Prince George's County is doing, from my conversations with their staff, I don't believe that they are spending any money in that category of outreach either. I suspect that, and I didn't hear the piece. Did it sound like it may very well have been effectively a press release that was being read?
They at the end of it, it said something like, I don't remember whether it said paid for or whether it said provided by or whatever, but it identified the Prince George's Board as being the kind of the sponsor of the message.
Oh, really?
So I don't know if that means that they paid for it or not, because I don't know enough about WTOP's rules for how they
And I don't know what WTOP's processes are, and I don't know what Prince George's County happened to do with this particular message or how that dovetails with our calendar. I believe we have a very similar message that is, if it hasn't already gone out, it's slated to go out in a press release at some point.
Right.
That same exact message may very well be. Certainly, it's been my experience with WTOP in the past. That's why we've tried to do more message coordination with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and try to work together. That takes so much time. We tend not to do a very good job, frankly, of coordinating as well as we should among the various jurisdictions in HOG. But one day it's a message from Fairfax County, and another day it's a message from Arlington, and another day it's a message from DC. And we have issues when it's a message that is actually at cross purposes with what we would be telling
This
our
one you
voters.
literally could say, if you want to volunteer in Prince George's County, call this number. If you want to volunteer in Montgomery County, call that number.
Right.
And typically we do get, when we put out the media advisories, normally WTOP and WMAL do call, and they do run something a couple times on that.
Right.
Remember, Alex, when we were looking at it, there was something that you wanted in there that we decided not to put it in. Was it the newspaper, the Express, with the Spanish and English version in it? There was something
because that everybody approved. I think it really was the radio.
Yeah,
the radio. It was the radio.
I think we
then.
determined
I
there
think
wasn't
there
enough
was
money
like
to really make it
$1,500
work.
for MAL and $1,500 for TOP, and MAL never called me back, quite frankly, and TOP laughed at me literally on the phone.
I want to throw cable into the mix too, because that's cheap. And I saw your handsome face on cable the other day.
We do have cable contract in place as well as Washington Chinese News, Telemundo, Radio America. I think those are the major ones that we've got in place right now.
Well, I just thought if we could add or ask for judges or whatever
So,
on this money, whatever.
Okay. Anyway.
Could we vote on whether or not to?
So what's the motion?
So, well, my motion was to move the money to begin with, the $5,000, and put it toward the marketing advertising. Do we want to specifically say to buy radio time?
Yes.
Let's
No,
do a
let's
little
let-
bit
Well, see,
of
I'm
research.
not sure I could support this unless I know what we would get for it. That's what I'm struggling with, you know?
So maybe the motion should
Do you know what
be-
you're getting for the 20,000?
Well, based
Yeah,
on
we-
what
we-
we,
yeah.
what we approved, but we didn't.
Yes.
We didn't put in radio. I don't know what threshold of radio, what threshold of money you need to put forward to make it worth it.
Well, and I understand what you're saying. What I have done, because I am on a budgeted situation, when I contact the media, I tell them, this is what my budget is. I need you to give me what you can for that amount of money. And that's basically what I do. There's no point in having them waste their time on a $20,000 or $30,000 campaign if I've got $5,000 to throw their way. And so I can certainly, what I do need direction from is, do you want me to focus it on TOP, MAL, or do you want me to split that $5,000 between the two? And then I can find out what we can get, and I can certainly send that around to the board and let them know what we can get for that money.
See, what I'm thinking is, and it may take care of your issue, Alex, is that if you could tell us what 5,000 on either one or 2,500 at both would buy, and then the board could give feedback. We don't have to wait for the next meeting. We could obviously, once we get the information, we could give feedback pretty quickly as to,
Sure.
Which of those, sounds the best to us.
Right.
I mean, ordinarily, I think you want to spread your message into different places so that you hit different people. But it depends on how much $2,500 can buy, and I have no idea.
That makes sense.
What that is.
Let's say, is it possible that the answer could come back that, might buy whatever it is, 5 ads for 1 week or something, that we might decide, is it worth it?
But we could decide that too.
Right.
It could be a crucial week if it's the week leading up to the close of registration, or
Could we have perhaps, Margie, put together a priority list? The priority 1 is radio, and then priority 2 is something else, and priority 3, and then we know if the system is what you say, 5 ads for all of the money that we don't want it, then we've got a couple of choices
plan B.
rather than us discussing it
Right.
a great
about we
deal.
do
Maybe
that?
we need to have
Because
Margie set the
what I was
priorities. She's the
envisioning
pro.
is for us, for Margie to call either both of those radio stations to get an idea what that's going to buy us. 5,000 in WTOP, 5,000 in WMAL, is it right? Or half and half. And then maybe plan B could be, if it's not the best investment for a buck, then divide it into the top 3 priorities that she already has with radio and leaflets, right? And print.
Well, we don't have radio now, so.
No, that's
Right.
right. Right. But you have a 2-tier thing. You have the radio, how much, 5,000
How much?
on each, or half and half. And part 2 would be reinforcing, $1,600 on these different 3 tiers to buy more advertising on cable.
I don't want any more, with all due respect, I don't want any more non-English. Has to be English to support everybody, because we have a voter all around. We have everybody. I just don't want to target at one group. I want to be English that everybody can listen. Everybody can benefit out of this 5,000 if you want to do it.
Can I ask what the message is that the board is looking to, is this a late in the day, same day registration message? Is this
Get
a
out
right
the vote
now,
message.
new voting equipment message? Is there a particular message that the board's looking to have Margie develop some sort of extra oomph around?
Well, we may have a better idea at the end of the meeting But
Yes, when we say what our
Yeah, let's
needs are.
see what-
But like
Okay,
David
yeah,
mentioned what he
yeah.
heard
Was
yesterday. I
election
mean,
judge
that's a
recruitment
good.
is what you
Right.
heard, right?
Right,
Right.
exactly.
But-
Do we need election judge recruitment? I mean, if we do, then, I mean, I would guess that we do.
We do, yeah.
And if we do, then I would think that would certainly be
Yes.
one of the priorities. Depending on the medium, I guess, can determine in part how broad our message can be, or whether we can only say one thing. And I know if it's radio, we could probably only say one thing. I mean, I think it could be any or all of those things.
Actually, following on Nahid's point about the outreach, Kevin, let me ask you a legal question on that. Since we are required to do the Spanish portion by law, when we are putting funds into it, are we also required to do the same? Or can we just say English only?
Well, we put a certain percentage in for outreach to Spanish, and that really kind of is at the board's, I mean, it has to be a reasonable allocation, but
Right.
it really is at the board's discretion as to how much is going to be allocated among Spanish speaking and English.
So if we're doing additional funds, then we can say that we want like 20% of those funds to be additional, maybe TV spots.
You could, sure.
Okay.
But we already allocated a
the-
good portion of our advertisement.
The current
To that.
allocation is just at or slightly over 50% for Spanish and just at or slightly under 50% for English.
I think, why don't we, I think the sense of the board is to move the money and then hear back from Margie.
We'll get some more details from Margie on cost and
So your motion was to move
move the
money.
move.
move the money.
Move the
And
money.
was there a
Money
second?
to the
I
marketing.
seconded it.
Second. Okay. All those in favor of Mary Ann's motion to move the 5,000?
Aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Great.
I did have a question for Mr. Karpinski. Does Section 203 only require translation of voting materials, ballots, things like that, or does it also require translation or a foreign language outreach messages?
It has an outreach component to
It
it.
does. Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, for
And we
clarity.
have a lot of money
Mr. Vincent,
allocated
did
for
you vote on that?
I did. I voted on it.
Yes?
It's a unanimous vote to
Thank
move
you.
the money, and we're going to hear back from Margie.
Okay.
Okay. Margaret, we
Voter registration. Jessica and Roberto, do you want to address the high school registration that you distributed?
before they say anything, at the state senate and at the county council, legislators have come up to me and others praising your work, Roberto. You're doing a great job, and
I'd like to praise it too. I saw him this morning,
Second.
yesterday.
Absolutely.
And I want to praise it as well.
yeah, Nancy
Ask
Navarro.
for a raise. You should ask for a raise. Come
I
here.
appreciate it. It's a team effort. I really appreciate everyone.
No, really, doing a great job in your staff. Great.
The staff is everyone.
Great.
This is a team effort. I really want to appreciate everyone here individually. and
But it takes good
collectively.
leadership.
And
It
I really
does.
like the team, so I really appreciate. As long as you make those connections, just line them up for us. We'll do the follow-up call. Even if you just send me a name and the number, we'll follow up and we'll make it happen. And we're very flexible. We move staff around. They have our team. They have also personal lives. So at times we try to kind of wiggle around and see if they're covered. So sometimes people get ill, family conflicts, but we'll make it happen and we'll go that extra mile. So going back to the high school registration programs, on that sheet right now, we're moving along with the high school registration also through Future Vote. The endeavor has been fruitful. Actually, tomorrow we will be at 2 local high schools. Watkins Middle High School, which is up the street, which will be Tuesday and Wednesday, and James Huber Blake High School, also on Tuesday and Wednesday. And we're all hopping around the county, and actually we've gotten 2 requests. Georgetown Day School, we're going to set something up with Landon, and also Emerson School, which is a school which is interesting, is in DuPont Circle in DC, but they have a high percentage of Montgomery County students. So we're expanding beyond the public school. We're getting the parochial and independent and private schools connecting with us. We do have an increase of those students participating in Future Vote, and then the students hear from their peers about the opportunity to go beyond election day service and to set up a voter registration drive and election judge recruitment at the local high school. Baker, no, Baker Middle School? No. Well, we have different events, so we have so many events, I don't have them all. No, we'll be at Blake High School. Blake High School, yes. Yeah, Blake High School Tuesday and Wednesday. The goal would be before the primary election to visit all of the high schools. We've been getting requests from Wooten and my alma mater, Richard Montgomery. They want us to go back, but I did tell them, we'll go back after the primary. We really want to bring the rest of the high schools into the flock. So they're very aggressive and excited for the opportunity to engage the student body. If you look at the breakdown, also we're really doing very well for voter registration, and also as it pertains to future vote election judge recruitment of 17-year-olds, we're close to 429. We've been averaging around 40 per high school, give and take. So I'm confident that we can definitely hit our goal of 1,000. We still have a lot more high schools to go, and then the goal would be also to go in the fall when the junior and the sophomore population becomes the new seniors and juniors. And the goal is to have this historical, institutionalized opportunity to get these students inside the pipeline to serve. And actually, I had a bunch of students text me over the weekend. They were taking their election worker training, and they were excited as well. So we're getting them into the flock. Yes.
Future vote. Can you address the future vote participation?
Yeah, so future vote participation is going extremely well as well. It differs a little bit from the school system where an ambassador will take the leadership of approaching the administration, whether it's a business manager and the principal. They will identify the favorite teacher or counselor, and they will talk to them about what they've done for us here at the office, outside an outreach or a demonstration event. They talk about their experience from middle school all the way up now that they're upperclassmen in high schools. I provide the guidelines as what 2 dates we would like to implement the drive. They talk to the administrations. Once they get the green light, then they'll email me the confirmation, and they'll be specific to the location where we will set the empowerment table, where we bring the information, literature, etc. Then we'll print posters, between 30 to 40 posters. One poster is focusing on voter registration and election judge recruitment. The other one also talks about the need for bilingual election judges. The students will give them a roll of painter's tape because they don't want to peel off their tape. They post them throughout the high school themselves in high traffic areas. They do morning announcements. They email through the PTA. They put it on their website. And they're really, really aggressive. And then they will meet our team at the main office before the lunch period. We do 2 consecutive days. We get a bunch of texts for the forms. We email them the forms beforehand. So they talk to their guardians to fill out the information, especially if they want the stipend. We need a social security number. At times, a student will also register to vote and apply to serve as an election worker. And we'll collect all those over the 2 days, and we process them, and we get into the voter registration and the election worker recruitment team. So it's going to be very fruitful, and the kids are very aggressive, and that's the one, especially like WJ and Rich Montgomery and Gaithersburg, they want us to come back. So as it pertains to Future Vote, it's really the leadership is the actual students. The goal of Future Vote is that they understand the whole encompassing aspect of election day preparation. It's beyond just showing up to vote. They know what goes on in this facility, and so they're more apt to vote when they become adults.
Roberto, could you explain again what is Future Vote? It's a program
Yes.
that is designed to motivate these students to, or educate them about
Yes.
what's involved.
So Future Vote, I started Future Vote in 2004. I was looking at an opportunity to engage the student body because what I've noticed was once they hit 12 years of age, if they go with their parents to the booth to vote, they must fill out a voter assistance form because now they're getting older in age. But then I saw the opportunity because in Montgomery County, 6th graders must start accumulating student service learning credits, a total of 75 before they graduate from high school. It's a state requirement. So we did a pilot in 2004, the primary, in the 50 largest precincts. It was well received by both the judges and the voters. And then that board and Margaret and the administration supported the program, so we expanded to every single precinct. Beyond that, we also do outreach. We train the parents to become voter certified registrars, and then the student will assist the parents to conjure kind of business. They go to health fairs, special events, and they are being incorporated into our demonstration outreach team. Then also we bring in the students to our facilities to alphabetize, to sort out cabling, and I will provide some imagery, some pictures of what they've done here in our office. Since the last election, they've given us about 55,000 hours of volunteer hours for our agency. So they encompass election day preparation, counting, sorting all the cabling, alphabetizing. The upperclassmen will do some time of stats, a little bit of research on my behalf. They do articles like little vignettes and pieces for their local newspaper inside the high schools. And then also outside of the facility, they will help us in the outreach. They also serve as interpreters. We had an event over the weekend at Lake Forest where my staff, I do have bilingual staff, but we didn't have one that spoke Chinese, Cantonese, or Mandarin. So I connected them with 2 Future Vote families to help at the event. So as they were doing the demonstration, the parent and the student were helping, especially with the language access. And we try to connect other students with other languages where we're deficient. And we're always looking to bulk up our language and our staff. So when there's a deficiency, I will leverage certain families within Future Vote. The goal of the program as they move on from 6th, 8th, 10th, every time we have an election or if it's an odd year within the students, we have students also volunteering within the local kind of neighborhoods with PTAs, HOAs, etc. And then on top of that, the goal is as they become 17, once they hit 17 years of age, then my expectation, I hope that they will serve as a full-fledged election worker. And we've seen the benefit of those students at the polls. They have young legs. They're extremely sophisticated thinkers, and they've helped us out a lot, especially the middle schools and high schools. And I believe, Gracie, Mr. Naaman, your children participate in the program in the Future Vote. We can talk on that as well. We do a large training session in the high school auditoriums because of the size. We will train about between 1,000 to 1,800 students. And also the components for the parent to come to said training, because we talk about election day expectations, your options, is basically all the outreach encompassed in that training for both parent and student. Yes.
A couple of questions. For the 17-year-olds, they have to be registered to vote in order to be election judges?
Yeah, they're registering to vote, yes.
So they have to be 18 before the general?
The general.
But they can participate in the primary if they're going to be 18 before the general?
Yes, yes.
Okay. For this chart that says all registrants as of 2016 by registration source, what's the beginning date that includes?
So this is a query of all students who are, as of February 16th, who are 18 years of age or under, to the 16 point being eligible to vote.
So if they are 18 on the 16th of February and they registered when they were 16 2 years ago, they are included in here.
Correct.
But it might have been before November 1st of 15, which is why they wouldn't be included in the other chart.
Correct. And this is just isolating the new registrations that took place in that age group because we can't break down specifically who high school students are in the registration system.
Right.
We can only pull that age bracket.
Right. But this is basically any 18-year-old currently in the system where they came from whenever it was.
Correct.
Okay. For the list of the high school programs, there's still roughly half of the high schools that don't have any registration numbers. And I know that a lot of them have these little stars next to them that say future outreach plan. I do remember from when we met with the interim superintendent, Larry Bowers, that he made clear that he wanted everyone to participate. And I guess I was curious as to whether we have any information about when they plan to do whatever they're doing, or is it merely that they have said that they're going to be doing it in the future? And then similarly, for the Future Vote election workers, there's even fewer than half that have provided Future Vote workers. So kind of the same question, do we have any indication as to what they're doing in the future?
Wait a minute. Future Vote workers. This column is actual election judge applications. Is that correct?
From Future Vote, yes.
This is the Future Vote program that translates into election judges.
So when it says FV election worker recruits, those are people who are applying to be judges.
Yes.
Okay.
Out of, and
They're not
another.
They're not SSL hours.
No.
No.
They're going to get cash.
These are people who are going to be 18 in time by the general election.
And the sixth graders to really 10th grade, but is the 1,039.
But the sixth graders will not be in here.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, we have, I think, 8 high schools represented for applying for judges. And I'm sure not coincidentally, almost all of them are places that have already gone through the drive, and perhaps have already been places that you've been.
There are some locations where we have complimented, like Richard Montgomery,
Right.
that had a drive, and we had a Future Vote drive.
Right, but then you also have a number of these schools that haven't had either.
Exactly.
And I guess my question is, do we have any indication about the dates as to when they plan to do what they plan to do? Because I know that, I plan to share this with Mr. Bowers because he said he wanted everyone to participate.
So I know we talked this morning. So for now we have Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Sherwood, Springbrook, Watkins Mill, Walter Johnson, and Winston Churchill. They have conducted their drive, and they're in the process of bringing those applications to our offices. Okay.
Sorry,
We ran. So it would be Bethesda,
again,
Chevy Chase, Sherwood, Springbrook, Walter Johnson.
They already have numbers here. They did it a second time?
Yeah, that's an addition. Because we actually, Walter Johnson, we went twice for Future Vote.
Okay.
Watkins Mill and Winston Churchill. We were hopefully in the next day or two, we'll get voter registration from the MCPS portion of the effort. All of the locations with a little caret, a little tag, we're going to go back to those schools without listed as having any Future Vote election worker recruitment and or voter registration. So we will go to each of those schools before the primary, and then
To the ones you just mentioned.
these actually, well, we've been to Walter Johnson, yes.
Okay.
And we're going to be tomorrow at Blake, and we'll be at Watkins Mill. So those will be updated.
That's for Future Vote.
Yes, that's for Future Vote.
But
It's not for voter registration?
But I don't have the dates. They are in the process, and I think, let's see.
Can we get those?
We have, I think this is the alternate Clarksburg, right?
Wasn't
we
it on
have-
the calendar thing?
We don't have the actual dates right now, but they have communicated.
I'm not interested. I know that you are on the calendar to go do your outreach. I'm
Oh, no,
talking,
no,
I'm talking
she
about
has.
their voter
Yeah,
registration
she has.
process.
Yeah.
So, of the school district, 26 schools or programs were eligible to participate.
Right.
We trained 19, sent representatives for registrar training.
So you're saying that there's 7 schools that didn't have anyone trained?
Correct. And
I'd
of the
like-
19,
I'd like a list of those schools.
and I have the list from the school coordinator.
Okay, please email them to me.
And then of the 19 that were trained, 4 never picked up packets or paperwork.
I'd like a list of those 4 also.
And then of those, and there was, I believe, some extension to some of the dates because they fell into the weather days.
Right, sure.
And so we have received 9 completed drives, and we're waiting on the 6 that he mentioned of the 19 that picked up their packets.
I guess my concern is that a lot of the App County schools are the one missing. And this, I think Watkins Mill is pretty much the only one from App County.
Yes.
But if you look at App County, at least for worker recruits, I don't see any school from App County that has one single school. Not, I know Clarksburg had a registration because my kid did it, but Damascus, Gaithersburg, Northwest, Poolsville, Seneca Valley. Yeah, none of those. So I'm just, if you could get that list to us, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
we'll get you the list as it pertains to the school system. And
So
with future,
I'm just
we're going,
assuming those are the ones that
No,
are
and we're
on
in there. We'll have the 2 efforts, and we'll give you the breakdown. But at least with the Future Vote aspect, a lot of the upper county, Clarksburg, Northwest, Poolsville, and Damascus, it fell during the week of the storm, the big storm.
Oh, I got you.
All that was pushed, not to bring
Okay.
it back. That's the reason why we're trying
Okay,
to fit it.
gotcha.
Yeah, that week was a bad week.
For all of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then monthly stats were posted on the website at the beginning of the month. Voter registration process petition to place the name of Rocky de la Fuente on the presidential ballot for the general election. And absentee numbers to date, we have processed 4,281. 2,358 are web delivery, which will require duplication. 2 are fax delivery, which will require duplication. And then 1,921 will be sent via U.S. Postal Service. Going on then to the State Board of Elections. State Board of Elections budget will be discussed before the Maryland Senate Committee on February 26th. This is when the Montgomery County lobbyists will present and advocate 50-50 split costs for the additional voting equipment for the general election of 2016. The Prince George's County Administration appears to be supporting this additional funding, again, to address the wait times during the presidential election of 2016.
Is
And
anybody
they're
against it?
expected to attend.
Is anybody, any counties against it? You said Prince George's is going to support our request. Is
Does that mean
anybody
they're-
against it?
Are they getting some too?
They're asking for more equipment,
Okay.
yes. But I am not aware of any county opposing it. But I think right now, only the two largest jurisdictions are advocating for additional equipment. Now, Allison can talk about Mayo. They are taking a survey of all of the counties and the city, and to see if anybody else wants additional equipment for the general election. Okay. The rest of the business is really under voter registration. Legislation, basically SBE informed us also that for the primary election of 2016, the screenshots from the ballot marking device will not be available. And so with that, I'm going to toss it over to Allison to talk about legislation.
Sure. If this were if the world were operating the way that Mayo's legislative committee always wishes it would, we would have all of the legislation happening in the odd year, and in the even year when we're running an election, we would not have the same level of legislation. But there's obviously quite a few bills in the legislature right now on any number of elections topics. What we have really only focused on a couple of those bills. And the board president and I have been now up to Annapolis. You know, we keep driving up there repeatedly in order to go testify at every opportunity on the 10th early voting site. That bill, that's House Bill 204, that has now passed the House. It received a favorable report from the committee in the Senate. And so now really all that remains, and I just checked again this morning before I came in to see if it had, gone to the Senate passage yet. It is not, or at least it hasn't been indicated as such in the state systems. But we are
Scheduled
hoping.
for this evening.
Is it? Oh, good.
The full Senate?
The full Senate. Well, at least it's on their agenda. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
It might be second reading, not third reading. And, I don't. But it's on their agenda for this evening.
Great, thank
Yeah,
you.
let me just jump in. I mean, on the 10th early voting site, everybody I've spoken to, Democrats and Republicans, this is on a fast track. The only blowback that some of the legislators have heard from rural delegates is that they only wanted Montgomery County to have this for 1 year because they're not getting anything extra. So there's the rural delegates pushed through a sunset clause. It's only for 1 year. But I would say that I just want to tell everybody that Allison's been a tremendous resource at these committees because whenever they have questions, Allison's there to knock out the answer and just provide whatever information. So she's been a tremendous asset to us. I appreciate that. So that's going through. Just got to get the governor to sign it.
So right now, though, Jim, it does have a sunset clause in it?
Yes, the bill that's going through has a sunset clause. That it's only for this year.
But there is other legislation to increase the number of early voting centers in 2018.
There is. It's House Bill 1008, which is a bill to increase effectively across the board the number of early voting sites for each of the. It takes the existing population threshold structure that we have in terms of assigning how many early voting sites each county would get. Now, what it would do in our case is that it would increase the number of early voting sites we would have here in Montgomery County to 11. It would take away the discretion that we have at the county level to decide on that language would be gone for the county to decide whether or not to have a certain number of sites. There's been a little bit of pushback.
Excuse me, the number of sites or the place where the sites are?
The number of sites would be 11, period. It would not be 9 plus 1.
All right, but they don't say where they are.
No,
Just
correct.
Thank you.
Correct. So there's been a little bit of dialogue among the election officials in the Mayo Legislative Committee about that, and quite frankly, the pushback has generally been the other direction. We seem to be, if we're not the only county in the state, we're one of a few counties that seems to be clamoring for more early voting sites. Generally speaking, I think some of the election officials are really concerned about their ability to staff and support additional early voting sites, and whether particularly expanding up in the gubernatorial cycle to have additional early voting sites. So Mayo has not yet taken a position on that bill. The legislative chair for Mayo had sought some comment from others in trying to decide how to craft some sort of comment on the bill. Your views and thoughts would be appreciated on that. The only early voting related bill that Mayo has, in fact, they sort of had some old language opposing a very similar bill that they just went ahead and testified in opposition to this one as well, is House Bill 83, which would be to extend early voting through Sunday. Now, we've seen that bill before, and obviously we have in-person absentee voting through the weekend, but we have our process for having to upload and download all the data from the poll books between early voting and election day. That would make that administratively impracticable to do it the way we currently do it, to have early voting extend. But that's the one bill that Mayo has actually taken a position against.
What do you mean extending early voting through Sunday?
Instead of ending Thursday, it would continue
so
Friday,
Tuesday,
Saturday,
we go
and
through
Sunday.
2 Sundays.
Right.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
When you said impracticable, does that mean impossible or difficult?
Depends how much money the county wants to give us to get it done. That all of that information, either fiber optics would have to be dropped in every polling place, so someone would have to pick up the tab for that, or I just don't even know how practically you could download. We would have to upload, so the polls close Sunday night at 8 o'clock. We would have to upload all of the information to the state. The state would have to turn around and get it back to us. Monday night by 6 o'clock, we would have to have the election judges come and pick it up and then take it to their polling place, assuming that we have the data.
So the words aren't impractical, the word is expensive.
Or every polling place would be linked via fiber optics, and that would then add another complication to the requirements of a polling place. If it has to be linked by, it has to have that type of secure access.
I could say possibly a security issue.
So it's kind of like, just how much money do you want to spend?
There's places that
And the county,
connect wirelessly over the course of election day from their polling places. It's not that it can't be done. There's places that send thumb drives out to the polling places on election day and have their workers upload data, but that would all be, a significant software change.
Right. It also depends how big your area is. There's some districts and counties that are not as big as Montgomery County who might,
That's for sure.
be able to do it. But question, can I just get clarification on HB 1008?
Yes.
Was there a support from Mayo on that bill? Was there any?
Mayo has not yet weighed in. There seem to
Okay.
be some individuals from across the state saying that either that the organization should take no position or should oppose it flat out.
Okay. And then HB 83, it was opposed.
HB 83 was opposed.
Thanks.
If there's a way to end up with our 10, rather than, because it sounds like the bill for the 11 may have some problems, especially if Mayo's going to oppose it and a number of the other jurisdictions may also be opposing it. But it just seems like if there's a way to hold on to our 10, that would be to our great benefit.
I agree.
And avoid a future discussion as to how to eliminate one.
Well, hopefully we'll have good statistics showing tremendous outpouring in
Yes.
all 10 sites for early voting.
I know which one to do, David. Veto.
Margaret has been very involved in Senate Bill 169 and House Bill 828 as the companion. This is a bill to allow us, when we have a special election by mail, to start the canvass earlier. And since right now, I think people would be looking for results, between Tuesday and Thursday, and they wouldn't be getting anything until you all convene the canvas on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. So the way that the latest version of the language, I believe, is structured, we would be able, at a minimum, to begin at 2 p.m. on election day, but the state board would have some authority by reg to give us procedures to go ahead and begin the processes that we do in the canvas earlier than that as well. And of course, we would need to begin those processes earlier than 2 p.m. on election day in order to have a meaningful amount of results by the time the polls would close on election day.
How would you handle the data between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m. when the polls close under that legislation?
Well, under the legislation right now, the latest version of it is we would not be able to divulge any results until midnight, really the next day. All
Midnight
right?
on Wednesday?
Well,
Midnight at the end of election night?
yeah, right.
Tuesday night.
And that's to address the potential, what I perceive is the potential of someone, I don't know, standing at a postal thing and knows the results at 8 o'clock and then proceeds to have somebody of his, put a postmark so it's timely to affect the end results. So it would have the mail ballot postmark of the election day before 8 o'clock. So it's trying to prevent fraud is what this
Right.
person is trying to do. And I've heard of it in other states, so it's not exactly shocking. Basically, what would happen is, depending on what permissions we receive from the state board, we would treat it just as we do early voting. We would upload the information into the server. It just sits there until we say, it's time, and we would run a tape that gives us preliminary results, and then those would be uploaded to the state.
But that would be at midnight.
Is there
Yeah,
is
or
there a,
11:58.
is there a basis to treat it more like early voting than like absentee voting, which is essentially voting by mail? I mean, what's the
The Attorney General has decided that special election by mail right now will be treated exactly as absentee, and that's why we've had to introduce this legislation, because the way they interpreted the law, the special election by mail,
Right.
is that if you had a county council vacancy,
Right.
and the council chose to have a special election by mail,
Right.
we would not even be able to open one envelope
Right.
until the Thursday at 10 a.m.
And I certainly understand not waiting until Thursday at 10 a.m. What I'm trying to understand is the absentee process is a transparent one, where we do it in public and everyone can watch us do it.
Oh, people would still be able to observe
Do
the
people
campus.
observe us do the early voting?
Yeah,
They
that's
can.
why. That's why we
Okay.
have all those windows down there. That's what they did last 2014. We had representatives from Hogan and Brown who watched the entire early voting process. And when
They just don't know what's coming out.
no, they can't see anything.
Like just there.
No, they cannot see any of the results.
Yeah.
So what's the position then on that bill? For
The
mail?
position on that bill is the county, because the county,
Mhm.
Montgomery County is right now the only county in the state that has permissive language to
Okay.
allow special election by mail for a county council or a
Right.
county executive. And the county's position is they want the section 9 of the special election by mail fixed so that it's a functioning legal tool for us to use if the county council would ever choose to conduct an
By mail.
election in
But
that
it
manner.
sounds like there's a number of choices that can be made as to how to make it a functioning tool. For example, whether to treat it more like early voting or absentee voting in terms of how we count them. And I don't mean about starting on Thursday. I just mean that, the very different processes that we use.
The way this legislation will work is we either start opening at 2 o'clock on election day, you open the envelope, flatten out the ballot, it's set aside, and then we would begin to scan the ballots and we would sit on the results until 8 o'clock. If it were a county-wide election, for some reason, then we, working with the county council, would go to the state and say, because it's a county-wide election, and realistically, we can probably process 7,000 ballots in a day, opening the envelopes, flattening them out. We would say, county-wide, we expect these many, and so we would ask permission to begin the process of the canvass 5 days out. And once again, it would be an open process. The state of Washington, the state of Oregon, the state of Colorado, all have an open process in which these envelopes are opened, the ballots are prepared and scanned, and then the results are not revealed until whatever the statutory requirement is.
Okay, but when we do the absentee count, someone who is observing that would at least be able to hear what we say, possibly view what we're doing, and get some sense as to the results before the results are posted.
We would look to the state of Washington and the state of Colorado and the state of Oregon to see what their processes are to preserve the secrecy of the vote. It can be done. It just hasn't been done here. And it's done in an open process in the state of Washington.
And they start counting before election day?
Way ahead of election day.
Really, way ahead.
Well, in the
So it's not
protection-
like they're sequestered somehow.
Yeah.
And the protection against a double voter is that each ballot, when it comes in, has to be scanned, so you would know if there's
It can
someone.
duplicate it.
It's a duplicate.
Mhm. But the state of Washington, their whole voting system's by mail.
And Oregon and Colorado.
Yeah.
Well, how would you know though? Because there's an identification number.
Correct.
That would
So each
On
still be
the
with the poll.
return
On the
envelope.
envelope.
On
On
the
the
return envelope, not on the ballot.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah,
way to
it's
tie
the
the
envelope.
ballot back to the voter.
So each envelope that comes in has to be hand scanned by someone in absentee.
So I have three other bills that I'll mention. The Senate Bill 331 is a bill that would correct a problem that you all would be confronted with during this upcoming canvass. Right now, you're used to having provisional ballots come to you, a good percentage of which are address changes, and you count those ballots, obviously. It's an individual who simply showed up at the wrong polling place or had changed their address without letting us know, and those come to you as a provisional ballot that you then count. The way that the same-day registration statute was written and the way that it has subsequently been interpreted, those address changes that occurred during early voting were going to be subject to the same proof of residence requirement as any other same-day registration. They were going to be treated as same-day registration. So two identical voters with an identical situation, one of whom voted during early voting, one of whom voted on election day, neither of whom provided proof of residence. The one on election day would have come to you with a recommendation to be counted, and the one that was cast during early voting would have come to you with a recommendation that it could not be counted because that individual had not provided proof of residence, even though they were a previously registered voter. So what this bill, Senate Bill 331 from Senator Conway, would do is level that out so that the additional proof of residence requirement would not apply to the ballot cast during early voting. And so that's certainly one that we're monitoring. We haven't really spoken to it in any public fashion at this point. There's a hearing upcoming on that one, but certainly that's being pursued with an understanding that it was pointed out to the legislature by the election officials who flagged this as an inconsistency that should logically be remedied.
Kind of a big inconsistency. Because then you have no incentive to do early voting. Right?
And then the big one, Jim had the pleasure of sitting through some very lengthy hearings on this topic the other day, is the universal voter registration. The way that the dialogue is, so there were a number of bills introduced, several of which were effectively taking the point of service requirement off of the Motor Vehicle Administration and the other agencies to to offer the voter registration at that moment and then forward the data on that transaction in a timely manner to us. And it would have instead just sort of required the state board to regulate a process for data to be transferred, data on all of these clients of the customers, the Motor Vehicle Administration and these other agencies. That approach is not what was being pursued in House Bill 1007 or in amendments that have now come to the Senate bill just recently. The approach that they now seem to be pursuing is one where they continue to have these agencies responsible for communicating with the voter about voter registration, with that individual about voter registration when they walk in. It's simply that the language that is conveyed to the individual at that time is effectively informing them that their information is going to be sent over to the Board of Elections, and notifying them of what the eligibility reasons are, and giving them then the opportunity to opt out, but to opt out knowledgeably in terms of what the requirements would be. And so that sort of fixes that set of questions about how the sort of accuracy of the data, or the opportunity that the individual has to know what's going on with their information. But what set of concerns that are pretty significant with this in particular are there's a lot of sort of back end question marks about this bill and how it would work applied to our software. There's a lot to be worked out there, but one pretty significant concern is that it has a pretty significant cost shift in it. That at this time, one of the states, something that is required of it by virtue of its participation in the multi-state ERIC process, is that when the state identifies a universe of potentially eligible but not registered individuals, the state sends a postcard out before the elections indicating to these individuals that they've been identified as potentially eligible but unregistered to vote, and giving them the opportunity to register to vote. This bill shifts the cost for that mailing off of the state and onto the counties. There would be really two mailings that we would be sending out. There would be the initial mailing to the individual who had opted in, who by default, unless they had selected a political party, would be about to be registered as an unaffiliated voter. And the voter would basically get a mailing giving them a window of time for them to opt out or to get in touch with us and say what they want their political party to be. And then, of course, they get the second mailing once we register them. But there is a lot. The Mayo has really sort of held back on this bill. We've waited to see the language, to see what exactly this all would mean for the logistics and the expenses and the actual data processing. In terms of the additional bodies that we would need to process additional transactions here. So really, none of the county officials have yet really sort of spoken up on this bill, and that's another one that there's active discussion about. Margaret, did you want to add anything more on that?
Well, the amendment that supposedly was going to fix all of these extra costs for the local boards of election ended up not fixing it, and in fact, now we have to, besides do the initial mailing to the individual, notifying that they are now a registered voter, and if they choose to opt out to do X, Y, and Z, we also have to send a postage-paid postcard to all of these individuals to allow them to opt into a political party. And so all of those costs would be at the local level. And in my discussions with Mayo, I did point out that in the state of Oregon, where this bill is somewhat modeled after, those costs were picked up by the state, and then once they got all that information, they passed it down to the local board of elections. So, on the policy side, I can understand, why they're doing it, the legislature being the legislature. But on the budget side, I think that this isn't going to be a significant expense to all of county government in the city until. And even if we did something similar to Oregon, Oregon said that for the first 7 years, the Secretary of State's office, Division of Elections, would pay for this initial mailing. And their thought process was if they went through 2 presidential cycles, that they probably will have captured the universe of individuals that are not registered and probably would get registered. And then the costs then shift down to the county auditor in the state of Washington. So, and I would even, as a compromise, but I don't really know where Mako is. Mako sent us a copy of the proposed amendment, and I didn't see it until late last night.
Mako, and this is before this amendment came out, at the hearing, the Maryland Association of Counties did in fact testify against the bill. They took a position against the bill because of the cost issues.
Sure.
Now there was buzz and discussions even during the hearing about, well, what was your intent? What was your intent for the members about who should be bearing some of these costs?
I would also worry beyond cost. It sort of flies in the face of One Maryland, doesn't it? That the Board of Election is always trumpeting, and the fact that if you're leaving this up to counties, what's the assurance that all the outreach is going to be done the same way? And I don't know. It just.
Well, this is rather sweeping, though. I mean, this has got to be the first time in history that an affirmative act of a voter will not be required to get the person registered. Is anybody talking about this? I mean, this is breathtaking.
Oregon just recently did it.
Yeah, and it was actually implemented for January 1st of this year. California passed the law, and it comes into effect January 1st of next year. And they also have to do some significant software changes. I'm not aware of the discussion. Again, that's not my, Allison and I love to talk policy when you guys aren't around. But that's not our bailiwick.
There's a heated debate.
Ours is the cost.
What agencies would it apply to? It's
Motor
triggered when somebody
vehicle,
comes into an agency?
social services and the academic university, secondary education.
Yes, there is a requirement that be incorporated in the public institutions of higher learning as well.
Alex, the committee meeting that I sat through, it was quite a heated discussion about that.
What's the bill number again? 1007, did you say? Yeah.
Well, Senate Bill 350.
Senate Bill 350
is the vehicle right now.
There were several bills. There was Senate Bill 350, there's Senate Bill 11, and there's House Bill 1007. Which one will ultimately be the vehicle, I guess I can't speak to. But Senate Bill 350, amendments to Senate Bill 350 is what we just received.
So who from our delegation that you know of on either the 350 or the 11 is supporting this?
Madaleno, Mano.
It's Mano. It's Senator Mano's bill. Senator Mano's the lead.
And Senator Mano, the way I heard it, I don't know how you heard it, but when they were talking about the costs, I thought that I had heard someone ask Senator Mano point blank what his intention was for who should bear the cost of these mailings. And I thought I heard him say that his intention was that the state should have to bear the cost of those mailings. But
Of course, Senator Madaleno is the one who's on the Budget Committee.
Right. But that language is not in the bill.
But that language is not in the bill.
I'd like to know what his interpretation is.
And Mako has not taken a position.
Mayo has not taken a position. Mako is on record as opposing.
Okay, but Mayo has not.
But they
Because
did not
of the
oppose the amendment 350 because no one. I didn't get a copy of it till last night.
they received it. The members received it during the hearing, and we received it later.
Has the governor signaled in any way?
There's a heated discussion in the legislature, quite partisan.
Is that it?
And then there's the one that, and actually, Kevin, I don't know, you may be
Or 45.
in a better position to talk about House Bill 645 than I am.
What is it?
What is it?
This is,
Can you give us a number again?
It's House Bill 645. It's in your packet, and it basically, the thrust of it is that it allows judicial review of a change in administrative policy by either a state board of elections or a local board of elections. And administrative policy means any action relating to voter registration, provisional voting, absentee voting, or the location of a polling place or early voting site. And Margaret sent this to me, and I asked that it be included in the board's packet for the board to consider whether it wants to take a position on it. It's very broad, and it would allow registered voters another vehicle to go ahead and seek judicial review in the circuit court, which, in candor, if this was, as it relates to the discussion of this board as it relates to early voting, would have been a disaster.
Well, that means we all would have been sued by people like Paul Bessel last year in the circuit court. That's what this is going to allow.
Plus,
Well,
there were 23 polling place changes also.
Right.
So that would also,
That's right. we
the
did
issue
that.
was the legal exposure that this little agency would acquire with this particular measure.
I only read it quickly, but I thought that the bill was saying that there was judicial review if you didn't give sufficient notice of what you were doing. I wasn't sure that it was judicial review of the
I
actual
saw that
decision.
too, but I wasn't sure.
And that obviously would be a big difference between saying you have to tell people however many days in advance that you're going to be doing something versus whatever it is that you do.
I don't know what an administrative policy, in terms of the notice provisions, what breadth of types of things we do we would need to give notice of.
It's not clear. And what is advance notice mean for somebody? Like, is it 30 days? Is it 45 days? Is it 90 days? I mean, what's a reasonable amount of time?
Right, and it says reasonable public notice.
Right, which, I mean, for me, it could be 2 weeks reasonable. So somebody, it could be, 90 days. I mean, so who else besides Lukey from our delegation is on this?
Luke, he sponsored?
Yeah.
One of them, yeah.
He's one of the sponsors.
And Sandy
Rosenberg.
Rosenberg is the other one. Baltimore City.
Baltimore City and Montgomery County.
Right, but it has to violate this particular provision in order to be subject to judicial review.
That violates 16201.
Yeah, what's that?
16201.
201A7 it says. Oh, it's in the legislation. Engage in conduct that results or has the intent to result in denial or abridgment of the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race, color, or disability.
Right.
Isn't that already covered by the Voting Rights Act?
I think it's covered by,
But a lot of things, isn't it? Federal.
voting, federal legislation. When Margaret said, is this going to have an impact, I said, well, if you get into having people filing petitions for judicial review because they're upset because their polling place got moved and they somehow tie it to something covered by that section. I mean, it gets very pricey.
The entire board would be tied to communication.
Yeah.
It would be a disaster.
I was going to say, Kevin, you should be advocating for this.
I was the one who raised the concern.
Well, I raised the concern judicially because I just saw the attorney's fees.
So let me ask you this. So where are people on this? Like, what have you heard besides, like, where are other counties and where are other legislators? Where is the county executive on this? Like, where is our...
And do we want to take a stand? That's on 2 or 3 of these. I was going to ask you at the end. Do we want to take a stand and have the board write a letter, or do you want to go and testify at each, or is there anything we want to do?
Well, these have they had hearings yet?
House Bill 645, I do not believe has had a hearing.
The universal voter registration has, and the
Really?
canvassing of the vote by mail ballots was favorably reported. And the Senate Bill 331, the provisional ballot issue, was heard in the Senate as well. But I mean, each one is still pending in some fashion. For most of them, haven't had a hearing yet.
But regardless whether they have had a hearing or not, I think some of these will have a direct impact on us as a board. So
I would want to know a lot more.
I was going to ask Allison, since you have been following this, I would like to hear what the staff recommendation is on some of these, including SB 350 and SB 11.
Well, here's the thing. The staff can can make a recommendation based on the budgetary impact, but the policy decision as to whether or not the state of Maryland goes to a universal voter registration system, that is something that is a policy decision of the legislature.
That's a legislative decision.
That is a policy decision of this board.
Budget one.
But a budget decision.
I would like to hear the budget, your recommendation based on budget, like the impact that this would have on us.
Okay, I can probably put something together.
Yeah,
What about House Bill 645, though, this one?
Oh yeah, that's. I wanted to put that in there too.
with the-
What about asking Delegate Lukey what his thinking is?
I'd like to get some more information, too.
Yeah.
Because if it's interpreted the way
I know
David
what's
said,
thinking.
then...
But that particular bill, you say, hasn't had a hearing or anything.
No, they should propose it.
But if it's on the notice provision, it's not as troublesome.
At some of the others.
Yeah, I mean, if it's
It
interpreted...
is in my
the way-
view. It is in my view.
I
Yeah, I mean,
think
it's
it is
troubling.
too.
I would want to spend a lot more time studying it.
Yeah, no,
Because what I told you was a very much off the cuff, scanning it kind of thing.
Well, and I asked Margaret, what the state's going to do on this, because obviously,
Right. Well,
I mean,
that's
they're going to be the first ones affected by this. What's the State Board of Elections position as it relates to this?
Yeah.
Hearing on that bill is March 2nd, Ways and Means.
next week.
Well, what I can do on House Bills, I would suggest on House Bill 645 that Kevin should get a hold of Nikki to find out if the state board is going to weigh in on this, because this is going to impact them as much as it's going to impact us, especially with regards to, what is sufficient notice, because that is, right now, that's very
It affects every county.
Mm-hmm.
so I would recommend that. And then with regards to Senate Bill 350 and the Universal Voter Registration Bill, I can pull together some fiscal information,
That'd be great.
okay? And I'll see what the legislature had with regards to statewide costs.
Okay.
Yep.
And if you could maybe just find out, or maybe you, Kevin, if other jurisdictions have any weigh-in in these
I will.
bills, that would be helpful as well.
Okay.
Now, are we done, Allison?
Yeah, so what we are making sure that we get to you is information on the fiscal impact of these bills, and at a minimum, just any information on who else is taking a position on them.
Yeah, whether yay or nay or neutral.
And the state's position.
Right. That's
Is
part
it,
of
this is just the Universal Voter Registration Bill and 645. Is there something else that you're after?
Was that 350?
Yeah.
Is that included?
Yeah.
350? Okay.
Okay, so it's just these two measures, House Bill 645 and Senate Bill 350 or whatever version of Universal Voter
Right.
Registration is
When
out
you
there.
look at 645, it looks like it's saying in subtitle 3 that in order for action to be brought in the appropriate circuit court against a local board, it would be brought by the Attorney General, whereas against the state board, it would be brought by a registered voter. So it may be that we wouldn't get the brunt of this that the state would get.
Exactly.
I'd like some clarification on what it is we would need to notice, though. I don't know.
Right.
There's an awful lot of things that.
That's
Well,
good.
but it's not that hard to, it says within 48 hours of of the decision you make.
Of the decision you make, or of
The decision they make?
Well,
the state board
that's
makes?
a good question.
Like, who makes?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Because obviously, if it's a decision we make, that's easy.
Right.
You can
But
even
then
argue that
again-
the tape does that.
But the other piece of that is, not to bring up bad feelings here, but when you voted in October, your vote was for a recommendation to the state board to make these specific decisions.
Right.
And that wasn't really the decision. The
Right.
state board made the decision. So where does the review begin?
That's a very good question.
Right.
That's a very
Okay.
good question.
So when When you all met in November, you reviewed the local delegation bills and decided whether to take positions on them or not. We've not had the conversation about taking positions on any of these other bills. So, and when we have the, well, obviously the 10th early voting site bill came from the delegation. The canvassing the ballots earlier is something that we've discussed quite a bit over time, and then ultimately it's the county's intergovernmental relations office that's come out with a stated position on. I had this conversation with the lobbyist for Mako last week. He said, boy, you know, Mayo used to be a whole lot more active on some of these things, and as you all seem to be taking more and more of the position that these things are political and that you don't take positions on them. And I think that's an accurate statement. And so I don't know if the board sort of wants us to take positions on any of these things. I think ultimately that's, you know, that's
Us being made.
we're probably, you know, no position with comment on an awful lot of stuff. That if you all want us to take positions on some of these things, you might want to, you know, just let us know. But
What do other local boards do?
They don't take a
Not
position.
They don't take a position.
They
pretty
barely
much.
meet.
Okay, because I mean, I think that there's a cost to us in being the ones who take positions on all these things when every other local board is deferring. It probably fits well with their image of Montgomery County.
So no position with comment is probably the norm, absent some particularly compelling situation where we would
Well,
be taking a
unless
position.
it has a
We can vote to
budgetary.
do what we want to do when it comes up, but I'm not sure that as a matter of course we want to comment on every state bill.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
Well, a lot of this legislation is coming from Montgomery County members, however.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might take that into consideration.
The bill that's got 11.
Alice, were you done with yours?
I'm done.
I have
We
this
have a
one.
list of which bills we're going to send fiscal information on.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one bill that's pending that only applies to Montgomery County. And I think it was Delegate Lutke, because I asked him where that was. And the board is split on this bill. The majority, it was a 3-2 vote of this board. There's a bill pending in the legislature and it only applies to Montgomery County, that the bill says that the selection of the next election director for the Montgomery County Board of Elections, the original bill was that vote had to be supermajority. 4 members to 1 member would elect the next election director. I think it was Delegate Lutke. I'm not sure. I think it's been amended. I think it's been amended, or it's going to be amended, that the next election director of our board can be elected by a 3-2 vote. However, one of the 3 has to be a member of the opposite party. And if Allison can, I think he said that there's a hearing on that March 2nd. You know, as we know, we're split on that bill. And I just want to throw that out.
Bill, oh, this is it, right?
No,
I don't think it's.
No,
But
what's the bill number on
Well,
that
I
one?
think
I was going to
we
testify against-
testified before our local
Yeah.
members on that.
But apparently it was sent through because it's now in committee. So apparently they sent it up.
Jim, do you know the
Yeah, he was
number?
planning.
Allison
to send
added.
And who made this amendment?
This was a hallway conversation. Allison, did Delegate Lukey tell us about the amendment? Do you recall?
No, not with me.
Okay. Anyway, it's floating out there. It's out there, and it only applies to us. This bill.
Why is it there at all? What if it only applies to us?
House
1077.
There it is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just like our 10th
What is it?
voting
Yeah.
site only applies to us.
Yeah, more.
Right, well, that I understand.
HB.
1077.
Do we know when that hearing is? I know. I think it's in front of Ways and Means.
Yes.
March 2nd. March 2nd.
Yes, March 2nd at 2:30, Ways and Means.
March 2nd, 2:30, Ways and Means.
That's the same as the other bill.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't checked my schedule, but I was going to go and testify against that bill. But I just, let everybody know that.
Is it the bill as originally introduced, or is it the bill as amended?
I'm not 100% sure.
Do you oppose it?
Are you
either
still
way?
opposed?
Yeah. I mean, the majority was
Well, I mean,
opposed to the.
Well, how did we didn't vote on?
Oh no, we didn't vote on the
second.
3-2. No, we didn't. You're right.
Yeah.
May
But-
I ask how this bill, what the
No,
origin
we
of this
voted on
bill
the 4-1.
is?
Under one, because it was
I'm
not.
Jim,
sorry?
may I ask the origin of this bill? If it only applies to Montgomery County, when I read this, I gave a thing at a meeting the other day on these bills, And I didn't realize it only applied to Montgomery County. I thought
Only.
it was all of the
No,
state
just
board.
Montgomery.
Well, then what is the origin of it?
Well, we found out about it before the Montgomery County delegation
Well, I understand,
meeting.
but why was it brought up at all?
Delegate Luke, he brought it up. It is unclear why he did, but somebody has asked him to do it. He didn't come up with this on his own. I mean, somebody has.
But we don't know who
I
that
don't
is.
know.
We don't know what the origin is. Thank you.
Well, it came through, our
Well,
delegation.
although, Alex, I don't know. He's a
He's very
a
focused
guru on
these
election
issues, yeah.
legislation. So it might be something that, in his study of things, I don't know, is the answer,
I
which
mean,
everybody
I kind
says
of,
also.
he
but-
never reached out to any of us about this before he introduced
Well, he hasn't
it.
reached out to any of us on some of the other ones
No.
either.
Yeah.
Nor has anyone else who's
Yeah.
introduced any of this legislation.
Yeah.
So,
But it would only apply
Is
to
it
this
the way
county.
we have is it the way we are formed? It's different than other counties?
No,
The
it's-
way that we elect our, what's so
I object
special?
to that. Strongly.
Well, we voted.
No, I
3 to
remember that vote. I just didn't realize until I was reading this that it was only Montgomery
Yes.
County that it applied to. I don't.
Yes.
Without us asking for the legislation, I don't understand.
So how is it
why we
done
would
now?
have it.
What's
It's
the rule now?
to elect the election director, it's a 3-2 vote.
It's done by a vote of the board.
Yeah.
And it's a,
right,
majority,
but
majority
it
vote.
could be a vote of majority from one party against the other party, and this would say that it can't be that.
So it's 3-2. It doesn't matter.
Right now, it's
who-
3-2.
Majority.
So the three of us could vote to select the next.
But is it
election
majority minority or is it anybody three?
Any three.
No, the beginning of
Any
century
three.
was 3-2.
director. Any three. But now the legislation is, it can be any three, but one of them has to be from the opposite
From the
party.
other party.
Oh, interesting.
But we didn't vote on that.
I didn't think we did.
I thought
I
that-
spoke to it at that hearing,
Yeah,
but
I thought that we had, but.
I don't
in-
believe
in a-
you did.
In,
It
in,
was-
in, in any event, I mean,
Well,
from,
I mean,
from
I-
my perspective, it makes the bill better.
Well, I was gonna,
well, I think there was a lot of talk about being against supermajority votes,
Right.
and I know
That's probably where it's coming from.
we have some colleagues who were.
well, I mean, I was going to oppose it on behalf of the majority, but, obviously, the minority opposes it, so.
No, the majority, I support it.
You support it. Yeah, right, that's what I mean.
Right.
Right.
My position hasn't changed.
But I think the amended version of it is even stronger. I mean, is stronger in a way that might be more acceptable to you folks. I don't know.
Well, to me, I think it's the
Why?
same.
I mean, no, because it's a 3-2 that way.
No, but to me,
Yeah, but
though,
it still gives the minority political party essentially veto power on the selection of the election director, in my view.
It gives one member of the minority. You have to get one member of the minority.
Right.
Mary Ann and I have been known to disagree on occasion.
Once in a while.
Yeah.
Right.
well, this may not come up for 20 years.
Right. But I'm just saying. I think.
That
Let's not cause a heart attack from Margaret
In a
here.
distant future.
In a distant future, let's just say that the previous minority also had occasions when the two of them did not agree. So.
No, really.
Yes.
That kind of issue.
But Alex, I was
agree.
going to appear and testify on our view, but obviously, you guys have the opportunity to do that.
Okay, anyhow,
Yeah,
nothing we can do about it.
Okay.
Are we taking that position or no
We're not
position?
going to
Well-
be ready for the next 8
Well,
years.
we already voted that 3-2 that the board opposed.
Right, but this is a different makeup.
Yeah, this is a bill amendment to require a 3-2 vote to select the next election director, but one of the three has to be from the opposite party.
Right.
Opposite
so
party.
it's a different
Right.
makeup. So
And I would say the same thing I said before, which is that I think it would be bad for Montgomery County if a partisan vote with either party in the majority and either party in the minority were to choose the election director. I think that, I understand that you can view it as a veto power. You could also view it as an effort to have a bipartisan majority support whoever the elections director is going to be.
No, I understand. I think our view was
The
that...
only similar situation to that that I'm aware of, and it wasn't full board, but we had occasion when I first became president of the board to select the board attorney. And it was done with a bipartisan committee of 2 members of the majority party and a member of the minority party.
See, my view was that...
That case would be unanimous.
It was unanimous.
The thing is,
yeah.
none of the other 23 counties have that provision. And to me, you know, I think it strikes against the will of the people who elect the governor.
Margaret is alive and kicking, and she's going to be here for the next 20 years.
Okay, so
Well,
I'm
I
just
think
trying to
it's
get
discriminatory to
clarification.
Montgomery County. I agree
sorry?
with you. I think it's discriminatory to Montgomery County to put any kind of restriction that the other counties don't. I agree with you.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get clarification. So are you going to make a motion then to change your
No.
for
No,
next
but we
week?
should. I guess we should
Well,
vote.
we opposed the bill and
Yeah.
took a vote on that. I don't think
We
have
opposed
to
the
break
bill.
it
We
down
opposed
as
the
to
bill when it was 4-1
Yeah.
required. But from what I understand, I could be wrong. So one of the delegates told me that it's going to be amended to a 3-2, but one of the 3 has to be from the opposite party.
But we don't know. We haven't gotten a copy of that.
Well, the
No.
amendment
amended
hasn't
bill.
been introduced on the floor yet, so
Okay.
it hasn't.
So
been
there's no need to
passed.
vote on anything.
But should we take a vote on our position on the amendment?
Well,
Wait a minute, you said 3-2, one of that 3 is supposed to be the other party, then it will go 3-2 again, the other way.
No. To elect the election
You need
director
3
of our
people.
board, you need three
One of them
three
is
people,
for minority party.
3 votes. But
Is
one
it-
of the
is
3 has to be from the opposite party of the other 2. In
Is
other words,
it-
3 Republicans can't elect the next election director,
Oh, 3 Democrats.
or 3 Democrats.
Is it usual for you to, in these other instances where you've testified and
They were all unanimous bipartisan.
it was all unanimous positions of the board, are you comfortable testifying, representing the Montgomery County Board of Elections
I would-
with a,
No, I mean, and I defer to the board. I wasn't going to represent. I was going to represent the majority because it's the split vote. But if the board doesn't think I should take a position, I won't.
I guess what I was trying to get to the heart of it is when you go testify, you're going to say that the Republicans on the Board of Elections oppose this part.
The majority.
The majority.
Or diplomatic.
Okay, diplomatic, oppose
That's
this
what we're-
legislation. I'm just trying to get clarification if that's...
But I would make it very clear that
Okay.
the minority members oppose it. I mean, support it. But if
Okay, I just was trying to...
if you don't think, I'm fine. I would assume they know it's split, right? From
well, not a full hearing or full whatever.
It's so,
I guess,
I mean, I don't want, in fairness to the majority, I don't
So-
want the committee to think that this was a unanimous
it's
decision.
so funny, the last 8 years, which the majority were the other side, we never had such a bill, we never discussed it. Suddenly, we become the majority, everybody is
We're the only ones that have to do it.
trying to limit us.
No, I mean, we're against it. But what I find ironic is that most of the time it's a Democratic governor.
That's what I was just laughing about.
I mean,
sorry.
most of the time, this is a unique group. You know what I'm saying?
I would think the other
not
county.
unique, just unusual.
no, but as a,
Just to make things fun, that's all.
as I say, the instance I can speak to, I felt very strongly that it was important to reach out and have minority participation. So that's why I would
Doesn't mean we would
support.
that would still be the case to have minority participation by any stretch. But I think more to the point, frankly, the overriding point is that this is discriminating against us when there are 5 other major counties. I know that some of the counties, the state board picks the supervisor or whatever. But in the 5 other major big counties, we're the only one that's been picked out and told how to pick our personnel. Why? That doesn't make sense to me. There's no rationale given. There's no reason, and it's just plain discriminatory. I should think the other counties would be very happy not to have us have to do that, because they would be following suit, one assumes.
Well, we can just have Kevin draft a letter and let us all look at it, that on this bill, the board was split.
I guess the question
Something
is,
like
would
that.
you feel the
Something,
same way
you know,
if
yeah.
it was the other way around, right? If it was a
I
majority,
would feel as though it's discriminatory.
either way.
I think
Okay.
the fact that we were picked out for a bill that limits anybody's voting rights is, and nobody else in the state, and no reason given, and no background in it. Why would we vote? Anybody vote for it? I mean, I just don't get it, and I would think the other five big counties anyway would be hysterical about it because they will be following suit. Or we add them to it if they're going to do it.
Not having an
Kevin, just send a
election.
letter.
Okay,
Would that be
if
more-
I'm
just
if
draft
I'm
a
you,
letter
I
that the
just
board was
leave
split.
the
We don't-
room. I mean,
not-
Yeah.
so
Something like that.
disgusting.
Avoiding testimony.
Save a lot of time.
Yeah.
I mean, but I do think the committee should know that, because everything has been unanimous, that this is
Well,
not,
that's right.
this is
Right.
not the Board of Elections bill.
Right.
You know, the majority of the board is opposed to it.
You want me to draft a letter to circulate outlining the views of both sides of why people are in favor of it and against it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most,
Well, the letter would be addressed to who?
to the chairman of the committee, who is,
Sheila Harrison.
Yeah.
is it Ways and Means?
Ways and Means.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would become part of the record. You wouldn't have to drive over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't have to get into,
And deliver.
some of these partisan things can go in a different direction too, you know.
Okay,
Could you do that, Kim?
I will do that.
thanks.
Yeah, because I think the hearing's March 2nd.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
you
we'll
it
get
says
it
here.
turned around.
2:30.
I'll get you a draft the next day or so.
Yeah, and then we'll send that to Chairman, was it Sheila Hickson?
Yeah.
I think that's okay. Now, wait, do we want to vote? Then we should vote, though, on the amendment that is either there or coming, the 3-2 amendment.
Well, is it an
Okay.
amendment that was introduced and passed in committee, or was it an
I
amendment on
I
the
don't,
floor?
I don't know, Alex.
Mr. President, how about if I go find out if there is actually an amendment, okay?
Okay.
And send it to you and the board members, all
then-
right? And then share it with Kevin, and then you guys can decide on the next step. Because if it's not going to be introduced,
No, you're
we're
right.
all wasting your time
Right.
right now. Okay?
Good.
Because I'm not aware of the amendment, that doesn't mean it's not out there or if it's not sitting
Yeah,
queued
somebody
up
told me.
someplace. Okay?
But if you're going to be here another 25, 26 years, it's moot. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't think it's moot, but I think it's.
Miss-
No, no, I'm
Tell
only-
you how bad I think it is, having nothing to do with who isn't in the majority. And I don't think other people see that.
No, I agree with you,
Yes,
Jackie.
whoa,
Discrimination
that
against-
should be the major thing, that they're discriminating against
Okay.
this board particularly.
Okay.
Okay.
If we're done with the bills, can I just ask something about the bills that to be done if possible? We discussed quite a few of them, and some of them we want more information on, and some of them we might want to take a position on them. Is it possible to put some of those on our website so the public has an understanding of some of the bills, like the universal voting one, some of those bills, like can we list them, like?
Well, the hesitation you're getting from me is how we would sort of identify which, so
I'm talking about the ones that we actually wanted more information on, or the ones we might take a side on. I think there were like 3 or 4.
There's Senate Bill 350, the amendment,
Right.
but there were.
And the House Bill
But there were
465.
4 other pieces of legislation that are similar. There's House Bill 645.
Right.
There's a special election by mail.
Right.
And there's 3 pieces of legislation that all allegedly fix that.
mail
Then there
legislation?
was the
Sunday
Is that
voting, there's
provisional.
the ranked
Special
choice,
election by
there's
mail.
all
I mean,
these task forces, there's.
Not yet.
We could, I don't know where would you put it? Where do you see we would have to displace something?
No, actually, I know like the Board of Education and some other boards, they actually have it when you go, like when they have like frequent ask questions or near the agenda, you have bills. Like it just says bills, and it has a list of the bills that they're either had a position on or posted, so people can actually be able.
Okay, let me talk to Elthman and see if we can add another tab for legislation.
Just the ones that are of interest to us.
No, we'll do the full election panel.
Thanks.
Okay? Because we don't have time to edit this stuff down.
No, it's just.
Okay.
Thank you, Martha.
Are we up to Kevin's report now?
Yes.
Kevin.
Okay. I understand that the last meeting, Mary Ann asked me to look at a new definition of quorum, which is in your packet. And it's actually a little different. I modified it this morning. And let me just give you a little background on this. The definition of quorum in our bylaws is actually it's derived from the model bylaws from the State Board of Elections. And when Mark Davis developed the model bylaws probably close to 10 years ago, there were certain sections that could be modified, there were certain sections that couldn't be modified. This is one of the sections that couldn't be modified. So a quorum was defined based upon not only voting members but substitute members, and so it was based upon 7 individuals on the board. In light of the opinion we received from the Compliance Board, I agree with Mary Ann, we do need to modify the definition of what constitutes a quorum. It's a little bit of an unusual situation given the fact that the reality is, given their opinion, which is if you had 3 members of the majority together, they have the ability to transact business regardless of whether one is a substitute member or not. And as I read the opinion, I don't see the same result if there are 3 members of the minority opinion, because at no point can those 3 members actually transact the business.
We can't constitute 3
Right.
members.
Correct.
So, now how do you put that in something that anyone can really follow?
3 voting members.
Well,
That doesn't quite
That's
do it
still
either.
the same.
no. So the language I came up with, which that I prefer, and it's more conservative than what's required under the Open Meetings Act, but it would be basically a quorum of the Board of Elections is defined as the presence of 3 or more board members, whether in person or by other means of communication. And what that addresses is if you have 2 people together and then you have someone who's on a conference call, basically.
But shouldn't it be by other means of communication where all present can hear and communicate with each other in real time?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because like text or email could be
Well,
considered. No.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of, you got to call out sort of the opinions that have said, there's certain things that aren't subject to the Open Meetings Act. Emails are not. Social events are not. So those kinds of things are already by opinions from the Compliance Board are not covered by the Open Meetings Act. I'm not wedded to the language,
They
but
may be covered by freedom of information, I guess.
Correct. I think, though, that the simplest way to address this is that when you have a situation where you have 3 members, that is the cleanest definition of a quorum. And we had, and the board had, a minority member requirement. And given the Open Meetings Compliance Act's, the board's opinion, basically you could have 3 members of the majority who could transact a meeting without any minority participation.
Under their definition.
Under their definition. So the third part of that is, in order for the board to take action, a member of the minority party must be present. So that would require participation by both parties in order to actually have a meeting where business is transacted. And there are times where you could have a meeting where you basically get staff reports, but there's no motions to make changes to the budget or votes on legislation or anything else is done. But what this third section would require is that if any action is to be taken by the board, it would require a minority member of the minority party to be present.
But Kevin, under your definition, see, my view is that if David, Mary Ann, and Gracie had a meeting, Gracie can't vote.
Right.
So they wouldn't have, the three of them are not a quorum.
Correct.
So shouldn't it be a quorum of this board is
Wouldn't the
three
same be true,
voting
though,
members?
if Nahid, me, and Jackie?
No, if Jackie,
No.
Alex, and I met, it would be a quorum because she's the substitute for Nahid.
Right.
Because the board has three members, the
See, they don't-
majority has three members.
We never, we
imagine-
never can be a majority.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine that one of you is out of town and you want to have a pre-meeting before a meeting, and Jackie is voting at that meeting. And I'm just using you guys as
Right,
an
right.
example because you're in the majority currently. But the three
Yeah.
of you would constitute a majority, whereas there's nothing we can do to become
Ever.
a majority.
Right.
I mean,
the
as
next
a
governor's
member-
election, perhaps.
Right. But right now, the three of you can't
Right,
transact.
Right. There's nothing we can do that makes us a majority.
We've always been the minority.
And that's what makes this more restrictive than what would be required under the Open Meetings Act. On the other hand, drafting something, it's not an easy way to draft it.
I have a suggestion about that. I gather that it's not legally required to change our quorum. We're just legally required to follow both what our quorum says in the bylaws and what the state says.
Correct.
So for open meetings purposes, we have to follow the rule about the three members, but for meeting as a group purposes, we can follow the rules as we have them now.
When you say meeting as a group,
What I'm saying is that...
For official meetings, or
No,
how would you define it?
I'm sorry.
But the state board said a phone call can be an official
Right,
meeting.
right. I didn't mean to put a limitation on it. What I'm saying is that if three voting members get together and it's not a social event, and they try to, and they try to enact business, regardless of which party it is, that you have an open meetings issue because the party requirement is our local board bylaw requirement.
correct.
If there's a vote, if you're talking about only if there's a vote.
No, the state board says
Any-
three voting members is a
No.
quorum.
Any discussion?
No.
Discussion that you may have on a future vote.
Right. The three of us get together for lunch and discuss
New early voting.
upcoming board business. That's potentially a problem. But our bylaw operates separately and in addition to that.
Correct.
So there's not really a legal requirement that we try to match them up. And I agree with you, it's really hard to write something that expresses what the state is saying, although I agree with you that it essentially is saying that three members who could form a majority would trigger the open meetings law.
Right.
But the other thing is that our current quorum requirement requires four members. Because our current quorum requirement requires 4 out of the 7.
Right.
And if we were to change to what the state's doing, we'd be limiting it from, we'd be going from 4 to 3, and we'd be enabling us to have meetings without one party as long as no action is taken. If I read it correctly.
Yeah.
Right.
That strikes me as being a big change.
Yeah, that is.
No question about it.
Yeah,
Well-
and I don't know that it's worth it in the name of consistency with, between the two definitions, if we can live with both of the, under both definitions.
As the requester of this to begin with, and Kevin wasn't able to attend that meeting, but I guess what I had in the back of my mind was creating language to go in our bylaws that addressed the resolution of the Open Meetings Act, but not to the necessarily changing our quorum law for purposes of meetings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you can't have it. They're one and the same in some respects because you've got to comply with what. I mean, our quorum requirement right now is not consistent with what's required under state law. I mean, the state's
It's not
proposed.
inconsistent either.
Are we in trouble?
It is inconsistent.
Are we in trouble?
No,
Because
No, it's what everybody else does.
No, it's completely legal.
How do other counties do it? Do they have this
Well, the other
three?
counties, I'm sure, adopted the state model bylaw just as Montgomery County
Yeah.
did, and they're going to have to change theirs as well.
if they want to, or I mean, what is
No,
wrong
they
with the
have
four?
No,
what
there's no requirement that you do away with the quorum requirement for a member of the minority party. That's not a requirement of state law, and the Open Meetings Act decision didn't
I guess
change
that was my question. Is it a
I'm
requirement?
not saying the minority member of the minority party. I'm saying that the quorum issue in terms of a definition of a quorum is 3 members.
You can vote.
The only time that you all don't have a quorum is when the 3 members of the minority party meet together. Under every other scenario, when you have any one of you 3 together, you have a quorum.
Correct.
So
And
any
when, I mean, for
combination of
example,
three.
Any
that's why
combination of 3.
we did away with the budget
Right.
committee in terms of being 3 members because it was going to violate the open meetings
It
law.
could be Gracie, David, and Jim. That's a quorum.
Right.
But the three of them is not a quorum.
Correct.
But any other combination is.
Correct.
That's
Well,
what makes it
for-
more
Why would
fine.
Gracie,
for
David, and
state-
Jim be a quorum and
Right.
3 minority alone?
He's a minority, the minority member, there's 3 members and he can transact.
They can
Under the
theoretically
current
vote.
bylaw, yeah. I guess
Mary Ann's on vacation. Gracie and I meet with Jim to plot out what we're going to do while she's out of town.
She doesn't even have to be out of town. She
Right.
can have a
Flat
lunch
out.
with her
Right.
boyfriend.
Having lunch with who?
Your boyfriend.
I wondered if you'd catch that.
Where?
She's like, where and when?
You might want to ask who.
Well,
Oh, like, where is
well,
it?
I mean, what do you think,
Where do
Kevin?
you
We
guys
should-
want to go on this?
Well, we
Well,
do.
I guess my
we do want to
question was-
resolve this.
Is it a requirement that we change this by law? And I want to hear an answer from our lawyer.
Well,
No, he said. I thought he said.
I think if you're gonna have people read your bylaws as to what your quorum is, the quorum requirement needs to meet what's required under state law, and the quorum requirement, as we currently define it, does not. And we've had this situation come up before where people have said, you had 3 people at your canvas. When the canvas opened, and your quorum requirements require you to have 4.
I think that's a little different because there's state law that says that all of us are canvassers. And that a quorum of the Board of Canvassers is a majority of all 7 of us.
All 7, right?
So
that's different.
so in that instance, I think that the people who complained about the 3 had a point.
Well, actually, though,
you know,
but the Board of Canvassers isn't any different because while all 7 of you get sworn in, the bottom line is if all 7 of you are there, only 5 of you vote, and it's no different than your board meetings.
I thought,
Where-
no, I
where-
thought all
where-
7
where
had
does it say
votes,
that?
no?
I thought all 7 voted.
yeah, I thought all 7 voted
In the
too.
campus?
Canvas?
Yeah.
No.
No, I don't
No?
think so.
No.
Just 5.
Where-
And then the
where-
2
where is
board
that?
members are, the substitutes are the substitute canvas.
Oh,
Well,
so
Well, whatever the case, the state law does say that a quorum is 4 out of the 7 for the Board of Canvassers.
The state law says that?
Yes. Yes. How is your someone?
would it be 3 out of the 7?
No.
It would have to be 4 out of 7. I would assume. It had to be a majority.
Maybe
Right.
good point.
I mean, can we add language that keep the bylaw, but pursuant to the state board compliance for conducting business, this is our quorum, something like that.
Yeah, I'm troubled by a lot of this because the very definition of a quorum is a collection of people necessary to take action.
Yeah.
And we're trying to straddle the line by having 2 different sort of definitions of quorum. One that satisfies state law.
Well,
No,
that's why
That's the current law.
That's why my thinking was not to touch the quorum language, but simply to put in language dealing with the open meetings law.
See, my view is the compliance board rejected our definition of quorum. And
That's not what their opinion says. Their opinion says that your definition of a quorum doesn't determine compliance with the Open Meetings Act.
yeah, but what Alex said, it's
Well, it effectively, I think, implies that this quorum requirement that we have really has no legal effect anymore. Because,
I disagree.
You know,
well, I thought they rejected our definition of a quorum.
No.
Well, they rejected it for purposes of state law
Yeah.
for the Open Meetings Act.
Well,
They
but that's
basically said that your local bylaw,
Right.
our local bylaw, cannot supersede a state statute.
right.
which I think none of us would argue with.
Right.
They did not say your local bylaw can't be a local bylaw. It just said that your local bylaw can't trump state statute.
But it
They're
didn't,
inconsistent.
well, I never argued that it did trump it. I thought it was consistent with state statute because of the statutory power to prescribe regulations for the conduct of meetings. So I don't agree with the premise on that, but I think, it's a problem going forward trying to have two different quorum rules. And it's going to be confusing to future boards, too, and create the possibility of an Open Meetings Act violation.
I don't think it is a problem because I operated under this for 4 years with both systems in place. Our quorum, and I was always cognizant of the Open Meetings Act, believe me, much to my chagrin, because I couldn't hold a conference call with two other voting members of my party on issues. I had to deal one-on-one with things. So, I mean, I think as long as the members understand that, there isn't a conflict.
Kevin, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think anyone reading the bylaws would not reach the conclusion. I mean, I think they read it and say, well, you need to have 4 people present for a quorum. That's the definition that's there.
Why we got in this mess. That's how I read it.
I mean, the bylaws are there for the public to read and to be able. I mean, obviously, this board understands it. You lived it
the hard way.
But anyone reading it wouldn't, I don't think, reach that conclusion at all.
May I take a stab before our next meeting at drafting something that does what Mary Ann was discussing, which is to make clear what the open meeting would be, so that someone reading our bylaws can understand what that says.
As opposed to what we have here, you're talking about?
Well, anybody weigh in before the next meeting as to what?
Yes,
So
because
you're asking anybody to write one that would
Well,
like
yeah,
to.
because it's an important thing.
Could I ask that if you're going to submit different definitions, that you send them all to Kevin so he can organize them, so that we have one spot just for the purposes
Great
of
idea.
the structure of the meeting.
Great
please.
idea.
I just would want to see what other people have to say as well. So
Let's do that. Yeah, anybody who's got a.
Kevin, I had one other question. You had said that
that's a good idea.
The state board does not permit certain model bylaws to be changed. Is that right?
Right. This definition of quorum that is based upon 7 members is what was proposed by the state.
And with the requirement of
Lisa, we'll keep that as an
one
agenda item for
the
next
opposite
meeting.
political party being present.
No, that was an addition to the Montgomery County Board of Elections, because in the model bylaws they had a minority member requirement for the canvass. And the board at that time said, well, why do we have it for the canvass and we don't have it for our board meetings? So they added that language from the canvass to parallel for the board meetings as well.
When was that added?
2007, 8, 9, something like that.
2007.
I have a huge file on bylaws.
Okay, so we'll keep that as an agenda item for next month.
Okay.
Kevin, do you have anything else on your report?
No, I don't.
All right.
Old business.
Old business. I have
Looking
nothing.
through here.
Okay, new voting system.
Is there
the
anything here, old
2016
business and other old business?
No.
Is that just I just was amused. Okay, thank
No,
you.
the next item's all new.
Okay, then 2016, the voting system. The voting equipment, again, is on site. Staff is still going through testing the legs on the voting booths to ensure that the equipment all meets a certain standard. We're still waiting on the poll book software for the 2016 election cycle. And again, I have been advised it will be here soon.
What can we, because I've gone to the last 2 state board meetings, and what is going on with the, you all may recall the memo that came out from the state office or IT office,
Right.
I guess it was, that just was, ranting and raving about all kinds of horrors with the new system. And the January state board meeting that I attended, had a representative from that office
Right.
come and speak to it. Complete 180-degree turn in terms of, oh, it's a very different situation now. This is looking really good. There are a couple little tweaks we need in the software for the poll books. But other than that, I don't think there's going to be any problem short of the election judges being properly trained. Now, that in a nutshell is what this person said. And I was like, wow, what a turnaround. And now, here we are. That was in late January. And there's still these software issues with the poll books. That's kind of frightening.
I don't disagree.
And
Unless something came, did anything come in this afternoon? No.
Is this related to the same day voting registration? It is.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, going on, MD Voters was upgraded. The little glitches that I reported about in January have been resolved, and we are selling lists of CDs of registered voters. Anybody interested? SB has been conducting training with the staff as needed. Candidate filings are complete, and supposedly we've been told that tomorrow we should begin the process of receiving the reports that we need for the ballot proofing process. And so I'm hoping that that deadline might actually be met. Voting equipment, as I reported last month, everything is in, but now we're still waiting for approximately 360 to 370 voting booths. The good news is the regional upload sites, I'm going to let Janet, is Janet here? Janet Ross, talk about the testing it went well. I'm very happy. And the sites that we're going to have are Olney Library, Maryland Praisner Community Center, Mid-County Community Center, Bethesda Library, Silver Spring Library, Potomac Community Rec Center, White Oak Community Center, and of course, this is the mothership, the Board of Elections. So,
Okay. On the 11th, as Margaret mentioned, we tested the sites, and we had ES&S techs with us. They were the ones actually running the laptops because it was the first test. And our staff was with them learning how to do it. And each time we loaded a memory stick, ES&S had us all do it at one time. So we were doing a load test as well as testing whether or not the data was coming through. And each stick took no longer than 4 to 5 seconds. And then Lisa said she got it maybe 2 to 3 seconds after we uploaded. She could see it. And the great thing about it is they were getting a confirmation screen that said, you loaded this many ballots. So if we looked at the report, we could say, yes, it matched. If we had a tape from the scanner, we could say, yes, we loaded the right number of ballots. It was really quick. Once we got started, they forgot a few things, so we had to come back. But once we started loading it, it lasted like 15 minutes, and we were done.
Wow, how great is that?
Well, I think we only loaded like 8 thumb drives.
So, but we are going to continue testing to make sure the fiber optics is functioning all the time, including the day before the election on April 26th, or the day before the election, April 26th, but the day we'll do the test is April 25th. We have the chain of custody documents that are at the State Board of Elections, and I also need to get a copy to you so that you can see them. Testing has not been quite as fruitful over in Prince George's County, but it went really well in Baltimore County. And there also the State Board and the local board and the vendor are all developing these technical process procedures for the upload of locations, and it's my understanding we should be getting those, again, I hate to say this, very soon.
Well, actually, in the test document, they had the procedures.
Okay.
They just need to go back and fine tune it.
Okay. So, are there any questions about the regional uploads?
I think maybe. First of all, what's change of custody document?
Chain of
Chain
of custody.
Okay.
So what it does, all it does is that once the chief judge runs the tape, then he places the the flash drive into the black bag. Then he signs that this has been sent over, given to this person. Then the voting operations judge will drive it over to Bethesda Library. At Bethesda Library, whoever takes the black case from the voting operations judge will sign that they received this black bag, and then the black bag with the chain of custody document will go from the street to the location where the laptop is. It's the exact same chain of custody we have with the ballots and the black card case. Remember the black leather card case?
Yeah.
They also had a chain of custody document.
Okay. On the voting equipment list that you have, ADA tables for polling places for the ballot marking device, 453. Is that the total number of ballot marking devices as well?
No, we have more ballot marking devices than that. We have 534 ballot marking devices.
Okay. Because this gets to my concern, and this might not be the place to discuss it, but, express vote. That's what be good when I get to know the terminology,
I know,
right?
I
Thank you.
keep
This gets to my concern about if for some reason we didn't have paper ballots and had to resort to putting people onto the express vote machines. It's still not possible to have two machines at each polling place.
No, there's 233 polling places.
Yeah.
And
233
polling locations. So you would need 466.
Well, you would have enough. Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
You would have. Is that, maybe you're going to get to that when you talk about the allocation of equipment, are you, in terms of what goes where? Okay.
And I don't know the place to bring this up, but it is a piece of equipment. My understanding, and please correct me if my understanding is wrong, I'm sure that you will, is I'm talking about the sleeves now that we put the pieces of paper. When I go in to the poll book, they give me a piece of paper saying my name and I'm registered, and it's going to go in a little paper sleeve. Is that correct?
Well, it's a plastic sleeve, yeah.
Plastic sleeve, and then I take that over to in the primary. I take that over to a table. Somebody takes it out of the sleeve and looks at it, then puts it back in the sleeve and hands it back to me, and then hands me a ballot. And then
what will happen is while they're waiting. So you have a privacy sleeve like this. There's a plastic sleeve in which after you affirm that you are, in fact, Margaret Jurgensen, and you have your ballot style, it goes in this plastic sleeve. Then you'll walk over, they'll pull the ballot for you. So in my case, they would pull the Democratic ballot, and it would be inserted here. There's instructions on how to vote on
into the
paper.
sleeve.
No, it just goes into this folder, privacy folder. Then
And the voter is holding onto the sleeve.
Holding on to the privacy sleeve. This is the privacy sleeve. Okay. Then they walk over to a voting booth. They'll mark their ballot. They'll insert it in here. They'll walk over to the DS200. The election judge will pull out the voter authority card and then tell the voter to insert their ballot. And then once they insert their ballot privately, they will take
The judge
sleeve.
takes it out of the privacy sleeve and hands the ballot back to the voter.
No, doesn't touch
The
the ballot.
voter
Authority
takes it
card.
out.
The election judge is only going to take out the voter authority card.
Authority card.
Voter is going to, your voter authority card is going to go in here. Okay? It'll stay in there. It tells me your name and the ballot style and political
Margaret,
party.
I understand
The
now.
ballot is in here.
My question is, why can't the voter? It's 2 or 3 steps that don't have to be taken. Why can't the voter do what we've always done and just carry our authority card?
Because watching the city of Rockville election, those voter authority cards landed everywhere but where that people were looking for them. At the city of Rockville election, people did just what he did. They stuck them in their chest pocket. They stuck them at the bottom of their purse. They stuck them in their pockets.
It's what gets printed out from the electronic poll book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It looks like
We've always had that.
Right.
We've always had that piece of it, and we've taken it and handed it to somebody.
What happened was
You always had to hand it to somebody at the machine.
Right.
Exactly.
and they put it in the little envelope.
What I'm just saying, it appears to me that we've always had to do it. It's just an extra step or two that might not be needed. That's all I'm saying. We've always had to do it, no matter what the men do. But men are not very bright about that kind of thing. And whatever they have to do, we've always done it. And this is just another couple of steps that I think are unnecessary. But please, let's just go on. I just need to make that statement.
okay. Fair enough.
The difference, I'll just make sure to sort of cover, is that before we would check in and then the next place we would go would be to the voting unit. And so you held it to the next stop. Now, because the state has told us to handle it this way, you get your voter authority card and then you have to go to the ballot issue statement. You're holding on to it at the ballot issue statement. You carry it with you as you go vote. You vote your ballot. Then you go over to the scanner and you have to turn in your voter authority card way at the end of the process at the scanner, not simply at the next station the way it used to be. And so that was why
Remember,
the concern was that they
we've
would
gone from a
get the
two-step
bottom
process
purses.
to a
We didn't
four-step
see that
process.
before.
All right.
So, as a result of that, Margaret, how many people do you need at the scanner then? Because you need somebody. What are they doing with the voter authority card at that
We're
point?
putting it in a box right by the DS200. There's a box that we have designed just for those voter authority cards. Let's see, Leslie, we have what we're calling a floating voter assistance judge, right? That we just added to handle the DS200. So we have maxed out, hello budget people, we have maxed out all of our expenditures for election judges and then some. So we will make sure that besides someone tending the optical scan unit, there will be what we're calling a floating voter assistance judge, so that if there's any sort of delay, they can step in, move the person off to a table, and have them either look at their ballot and see what the problem is, or confirm that they want to vote their ballot exactly as it exists, or walk them back over to the ballot table and have the ballot reissued. Again, I want you to keep in mind that we had 6,500 voters in the city of Rockville. 64 ballots had to be reissued because of voter error. The bigger problem was when they tore the ballot away from the perforation. That caused more problems. That spoiled more ballots than anything. Okay? It was not voter error. It was election judge error, and Leslie is training the staff to fold that piece of ballot over, make sure it's loose, and slowly tear it off. And even if they start a bunch, that they, do it in a manner that's not going to, because the ballot has these tick marks that we cannot mess with.
And that's not something we can do ahead of time.
No.
In other words, take them all off.
No, because the night before, what happens is the election judges will receive their ballots. They have to account for all of the ballots. So ballot stub number 0001 to 001000 was issued to 11, and they need to confirm that, yep, that's what we got. And then we got so many Republican ballots, and no, you don't get to do anything with the ballots till the morning of the election.
So
Are they going to count those, every one of the pad?
Yes,
To make
not everyone in the pad, they're gonna count
count the
every
pads,
pad.
but they're going to assume the
Leslie.
At
pads
the
were
end of the
correct.
night, they do have to count the unused.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask.
So, you've got to do from what's left on that pad.
So it adds up.
In order to keep your accounting straight, as opposed to you pulled off, 15 in advance and you don't know where they fall.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you have a stack of the spoiled ballots.
Exactly.
Okay, any other questions? All right, going on to transportation. Again, we've been meeting with County General Services to discuss picking up the voted ballots in the blue bin and have them delivered here. They have the list of polling places. They're putting them in route order, and General Services has reached out to our department as well as DTS to help develop those routes. They also asked for census information in terms of how many voters are in each precinct, so that they may be able to weight it so that a smaller precinct goes first and the larger precinct is the last for purposes of routing. We also met with the state board vendor and we reviewed the SPE requirements for the cart, the packaging requirements for early voting and election day. We discussed the weight of the cart. There were a couple places that we had to make sure that black cart would go, like for instance, a Wheaton Fire Rescue. We had to make sure that the weight would create a problem. We spent a lot of time talking about labeling the delivery black cards as well as updating the hauler cards for the driver and the polling place recipients. And then we have a meeting. Originally I had March 7th. I think it's been changed, but we are meeting with the public schools facilities with regards to delivery of the cards, as well as we are going to have an opportunity to train some of the building services building services staff on what to expect to see in this new world of elections. Election judge update, there's an updated packet that was, there was an updated graph in your packet. Leslie, or, isn't there?
They received the original graph in advance. Leslie has. We just did them this morning.
Okay, and Leslie, do you have anything you want to add?
It is going along. We certainly do need more judges. Margie's working on her press release to get that out. If you can help us in any way, that would be appreciated. I know Humberto and I are constantly looking for new opportunities to go out and recruit, so if you know of anything, please let us know. Our numbers don't look too bad, but we have reached a point where we're starting to do phone calls. We send a weekly reminder to individuals to take their quiz, complete their training, but unfortunately, some people don't move on that. I have to be honest, I've probably got 12,000 emails sitting on mine. And I'm like, oh, okay. And we fall into that category. So we started with phone calls just to reach out and say, can we get you scheduled? Are you still with us? It's very easy for individuals to sign up, but getting them to really commit and go to training and finish sometimes is very challenging. Once we get them to do the quiz, they're a bit more committed, and if we can get them into the classroom, we pretty much have a lock on them. So we do have quite a few people scheduled. Most of our VOP classes are full. I'm constantly squeezing them in to make up for the snow days that we lost. Most folks were very understanding because they didn't want to try to get up here in inclement weather, but it has put a bit of a burden on us of getting those people back in. We were able to really contact them efficiently through specific emails, phone calls, posting on our website when we had issues. So they were well informed. It's just getting them to look back at their calendar and figure out when they can come in. So it's going well. We still got a ways to go, as you can see. I would note that the assignment is not done until training is completed, and the recruiters are right on top of that. So When they finish training, the next day, they're assigned. So we can get those people through, we'll be okay. Now, where it says completed training, there's a discrepancy. A lot of those are chief judges who, because we have the new equipment, are required to do both the basic VOP class and then their chief training. Okay?
So the 979 are just chief judges?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
the 979 is completed training, all positions.
All positions?
Yes.
So
Okay.
some of it's duplicative. In other words, they've trained for both parts.
Yeah.
So if they train for both, they're listed twice?
No,
They're listed
no,
once?
she took those numbers out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the 979 is everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your target is what,
When
2,500?
Leslie says it's a discrepancy, what she means is
3,000.
that in previous charts you've received,
You only have
the double counting of those chiefs had not been taken out. This time, we took the double counting of the chiefs out of that number. That's the
Okay.
discrepancy.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And Leslie, out of the 979, how's your bilingual judges?
We're at the point of, once they're on my side, they're trained, they're just a VOP.
Yeah.
So we've got to get through the certification that Roberto has to do when he's
Yeah, I'm
when he's
looking at-
here.
so how
you're like stop.
So once he flips them, once he certifies, then they'll come out of our VOP numbers into the Spanish numbers.
So right now, how's it look?
Between all the outreaches and coming this
You don't
morning.
know?
Yeah, so I ran a report right
Just
here
a
with about
ballpark.
103 that I need to certify.
Okay.
So we have a good pool. It's just a matter of getting there. We're going to leverage some resources with Jessica's team to do some calls, some follow-up calls,
Okay.
and connecting so I can certify them into the pipeline.
Awesome.
And when we have individuals that go to trainings, it's stat. I immediately get a record and I call them. Like today, I called 3 individuals and they're already assigned. So if they go through quiz, training, it's like stat. I'll call them from where I'm at. I get an email from Debbie or from Jessica, certify them, and I've done them on the fly, like on the road. I'll call them and then I'll update the record when I can.
And part of that, it's easier for us to not have to place them as a VOP and then say, oh, okay, this one's certified and I need to move.
Right.
So we want to do it all in one movement.
sense.
How are you with repeat customers coming back now that we have the new system?
Most of them have been coming back. Our biggest issues are just availability. So I would say half of our numbers are returning. It's really, what's the schedule? Am I going to be in town? Family vacation time. So that's our biggest concern, and work.
And do you think, are people finding it easier than the past system, or the same as, harder?
I think most people view it as easier, much easier. Particularly setting up, doing the integrity reports. You don't have 18 or 20 units that you have to do. The scanning unit is a chief judge function, so they're saying, okay, I don't have to wait for them to go through all this verification on the machine. I might get out of here earlier. So very simple process, and they're picking up on that. Our judges have a lot of questions when they come to training, and they're making that comparison, and so they're ready to go. Yeah, I know Roberto's had a lot come to the outreach, so.
Yeah, so they come to the outreach for that fact. We do the whole demo, and even like yesterday, my wife has 2 colleagues at Family Services Inc. And I asked them, I've seen you haven't done anything, but when they talk, you tell them about the closing procedure. Oh, is it that? She's like, I wasn't sure. I'm like, yeah, I'm coming. And so, so I think once they hear about the different procedures, opening, as pertains to opening equipment, setting up, and then the closing procedures, then they're more at ease, and then they'll start doing the quiz and start getting into the pipeline. But and so and also quickly, like for example, the future vote, just in Einstein alone, we recruited 21 bilingual students in Spanish. And when we do the recruitment, if I'm at that event, I'm literally certifying them on the fly. So when I see their name, it's much quicker. So we're getting a lot of resources through those efforts.
I'm wondering if in your outreach, if there's something you can say to people that have served in the past and, maybe they haven't come in yet or whatnot. I don't know how often you send them email reminders or whatnot that you're still looking. But to say something like, easier new process. I mean, because it sort of strikes me that it is easier and quicker, and overall, once they see that, they're going to like it better.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And also by design, our outreach team members, out of the 6, 3 are chief judges. So they know the procedure, so they're really good about selling from their perspective.
Thank
Okay.
you. Leslie, I'd like to publicly thank you for the information you gave me and all of the brochures that I've, 2 or 3 meetings that I'm giving them out, and people are reading them and looking at them. I thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. And I extend that to anyone. If you'd like brochures and things, I'll be more than welcome to pack a bag for you.
Okay.
If I can just underscore one point, these
tomorrow.
606 people, they got their choice of assignments in terms of where they wanted to serve.
Oh, yeah.
So the people that you talk to, like,
Early
yeah, I'll get
bird,
around
yeah.
to it eventually. The early bird really does get the worm here. It is difficult for Leslie to take fully staffed teams and shoehorn people into the precincts they want to serve to late in the game. So the people that you know are kind of like willing to do it, selling them on getting into their training seats early would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Going now, you know what? Since we talked about outreach, Humberto, why don't you just go with outreach, since it's already been mentioned earlier.
Yes. So you have a snapshot of outreach events scheduled from the 11th of January through the 11th of April. Since this was developed, we added another half dozen or so events. So if you look at the breakdown, as of February 11th, we have 64 completed. We had 21 cancellations because of the snow, obviously. I didn't want to send the team out, especially in the snow, and keep the roads clear. 125 confirmed. But since the 19th of January of 2015, since we do outreach throughout the year, even in the off years, we had over 357 completed, 37 canceled, and 125 confirmed. So we're out there and about, we're circulating, we're aggressive, and any links you could do, please just send them my way, and we'll set them up and we'll knock them down.
Okay, thank you, Humberto. Election judge manual, just kind of dovetailing on Leslie. We decided to go to publish with what we have. We're still missing chapters on same-day voter registration, early voting, and the troubleshooting guide. But we are not training for those positions for at least another 10 days. And supposedly today, we were told we would be receiving the early voting chapter today, tomorrow.
Can you repeat again what ones you're missing, please?
Same-day voter registration, early voting, and the troubleshooting guide. So, early voting, as I understand it, is supposed to be posted on the website today or tomorrow morning. Same-day voter registration and the troubleshooting guide. I did ask our technical person from the state what the status of that troubleshooting guide is, and they said that that the first draft had been completed and that it was being sent to the technical writers to sign off on the final edits. So hopefully, because as I recall, they will begin the process of training technicians to work for the state but are assigned to counties, not our county, but other smaller jurisdictions.
So the judges you've been training now are for election day.
Yes.
So no training's been done yet for the early voting.
Or same day.
And of course, they would be dealing with the same day registration. But the troubleshooting guide,
which goes to the roamers.
Oh, it goes to the
chiefs.
roamers. Okay, and chiefs.
Well,
okay.
we'll go to chiefs, but we encourage the chiefs to not be Mr. Fix-It or Mrs. Fix-It, to call the roamers. Yeah.
The troubleshooting guide is primarily, there's two things. The ones that will go into the main is primarily identification, problem identification, and triage. The secondary one is what would be used by our roamers and the technicians, which would have a higher level of information. There are certain things in the state, nor are we comfortable with chief judges going into the units and doing. So what we're waiting on, the earliest piece would be the basic guide for chief judges, which just says if you get this message, call the help desk. And then there's another piece that is not a part of the manual, which would be the higher level for the technicians and roamers.
So when is your early voting training starting?
Our early voting training is scheduled for March the 2nd. It does not include same-day registration training. It is just basic early voting.
Will all of them have to come back for the other?
For the same-day registration?
For the same-day registration?
That's really
No, we're segregating out the individuals that are going to do the same-day registration.
At each precinct?
At each early voting site.
Okay.
So that is a different work group, if you will. So we have to start with the basic training for.
Are you doing only one person or two at each early voting?
Two per site.
Okay, just in case one cannot make it, or
yes.
that does happen.
So the basic early voting training will start on March the 2nd. And then once we get the same-day registration information, we'll be able to set the training for that group.
But those people are the ones that are going to be the whole time there, right? The two people who are your training, they're going to be there the whole time, every day, on early voting.
All 8 days?
Yeah.
The same-day registration are only same-day. They're not doing anything else. They're just same-day registration.
Great.
Okay.
That's great. That's great, because that's going to be people are going to be...
You don't have a date for that yet.
Really confused with that.
Yes, it will.
Hard to set a date because we don't have.
And then are you doing a little piece of training on when people show up at the general election and they want to do same day registration, like what to say and on election day? Yes. Oh.
We send them
Give
over
them a
to the provisional ballot.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Like you're training all your judges.
Provisional.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's no different than the
That's no
past.
different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Election judge manual, equipment allocation.
I've been waiting for this.
3 per polling places.
Whoops.
Oh,
Wait a second.
I'm in the dark. Literally. Is that what you were going to say?
I'm
Yes,
not saying,
you are.
I'm not saying anything.
You're supposed to sit out.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay,
you look like Harry Clinton up there.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know I do.
Oh,
I'm not part of that party, sorry.
Oh, line management. Yeah, we have that in there.
Okay, so.
I just want to share. Jackie, can you see?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Better than when it's up there.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Oh.
you're not going to be able to read this very well, but this first column talks about the early voting equipment, and I think that's what David first identified. The state board, for each of our numerous early voting sites, allocated 2 DS200s, 12 ballot marking devices, express votes match the number of poll books. 4. Does someone know? That was 4. Yeah.
Use the 100 or the scanners, right?
The scanners,
And then
12 ballot marking devices, 4 express printers that go with the poll book. All right, and then when Allison and I sat down and determined what we believe we need for the general election. Now keep in mind that when we're preparing the early voting materials for the state board, we're doing it for the full election cycle. So we're going to tell the state what our recommended utilization will be for the general election. So in that instance, we recommended 3 and 4 DS200s. We recommended 24 to 39 ballot marking devices. We have prepared and recommended 8 to 16 express printers and with poll books. And based on what we seen in the numbers that we were able to run and hypothesize with regards to the actual turnout for early voting during a presidential, plus we have allocated another 20 express votes and 20 printers and poll books, so that we can help expedite the process of getting people through the early voting stations. And most of what Allison and I did back in November was we both have been monitoring these 2 major studies that were related to wait times and managing lines for voters. And one was the Cooperative Congressional Election Study, and the other one was a study of performance American elections. And these 2 national studies, but really the American one, talked about the fact that in your PowerPoint you'll be able to read these numbers a little bit better, but 36% of the time there was no waiting, and then there's another 31% there was less than 10 minutes, and 18% 10 to 30 minutes, and of course then you have about 10% that waited 31 to 60, and then the balance of them had to wait greater than an hour. So what Allison and I looked at was, we know that based on behavior that has been observed by our election judges through 2 different studies via John Willis, our election judges can check in an average voter in 55 seconds. And we also know that the average ballot will take about 30 seconds if it's a 1-page ballot. We also know it takes 45 seconds if it's a 2-page ballot. What we don't know is what kind of problems there will be at the ballot issuance table, and what's the time that the voter uses to mark the other ballot. The other thing in terms of the discussions that we've had with regards to wait times is in the study from Caltech and MIT that talks about voters and when they arrive and how long they wait, and where does that process begin psychologically with the voter. So a lot of times if the voter gets checked in, then they consider themselves at a winning point. And what happens afterwards isn't felt as keenly as just standing outside waiting to be checked in. Also, with early voting, the information suggests that since it occurs during a little bit more traditional business hours, they have a little bit more tolerance for waiting as opposed to those on election day. But wait times are different for both election day and early voting. But the goal in our department, in the Board of Elections here, is to try to have every voter process within 30 minutes from the time they check in. So I'm going to let Allison, we talked about this before, but I'm going to let Allison address this chart coming from the 2012 presidential election and the information that we received from the congressional study.
Sure. What Margaret has in here is a couple of flashback slides that some of you will have seen before and others of you haven't seen before. This was a slide that we put together in 2013. We really used this chart, as some of you may have seen, this was USA Today, everything. In 2013, as Charles Stewart from MIT was going through this data, he had a chart that showed which states have the longest lines. And of course, at the very end on the right of the chart was Florida. But then tied right behind Florida were Maryland and the District of Columbia, and then Virginia and South Carolina, and then you have this drop-off onto the other states in terms of how long the lines were. So what we did was follow up and try to dig deeper into the data, and we asked if there were a significant, enough number of responses in Maryland to be able to analyze, well, how did we do? Here in Montgomery County, did what we tried to do work? We knew that we were going to have these crazy lines, but we only had so much equipment to go around. We couldn't deploy that much more. And what we did find when we dug deeper into the actual survey data, and this is surveys of voters after their election experience, asking them how long they feel that they waited in line. And the purple bar that's far on the right here in this main chart is the wait time in minutes. We had our voters reported that they had waited an average of more than a half an hour to vote in the 2012 presidential election. But on the far left, the light blue bar, voters in Prince George's County had reported that they had waited about 75 minutes on average to vote. And Anne Arundel, Baltimore City, and Baltimore County each had longer reported wait times than we do. So the lesson that we took away from that, what the two charts on the right showed, was that it was not because we had a significantly different voting experience, like we had more people vote early or more people vote on election day. The chart on the top on the right was our number of early voters compared to our election day voters, and the chart on the bottom was the number of our voters who voted on election day. The difference was really equipment allocation. We deployed significantly more resources than the state required to our early voting centers, and then we husbanded our resources. I think we have good reason to credit ourselves for husbanding those resources pretty wisely to deploy them where the lines were going to be, to at least improve upon the baseline of what the state's formulas were.
So, in terms of what we're going to do to address equipment functionality in line, early voting, we're going to continue to advertise the locations every opportunity we get. We will have our wait time on our website. That's updated every 60 minutes and more often as the end is near. We're also investigating, another jurisdiction has an app that we might be able to apply so that we can do it much more frequently and a lot more seamlessly. We also are deploying, as I said, we're using every dime of our election judge stipend and a little more to make sure that we have the resources there and the personnel. And we're doing something we've not done before, and that is particularly with the same-day voter registration and provisional judges, is that we're really focusing on several different personnel or election judges just to do that work. Admittedly, early voting in Montgomery County, except for the general election during Hurricane Sandy, we really haven't had any wait times except maybe during the last hour. Election day, peak voting is at 7 a.m. Anything that we can do to convince the voters that they either vote early or vote by mail, especially if they're a voter that wants to vote between 7 and 9, because that's our peak period based on years and years of data. We will deploy all of our voting equipment that we have, except maintaining a small reserve in case of fire or emergency. We are training our roamers to serve as runners, and they also have some supplies in their cars so that they can help. We will continue to have standby election judges. That is a difficult thing to convince the Office of Budget that standby judges are important to finance. And when worse comes to worse, staff has been informed that they will be attending training classes, because if we have a failure at a polling place, they are going to be there. The 2012 presidential election.
Yeah, this is again from that same presentation from 2013, and what it really was looking back at what we thought had worked in our advantage to try to manage the lines that we had. And the first thing that we needed to credit in looking at why we were able to achieve shorter lines than other jurisdictions in the state was, first and foremost, that we simply had good facilities, that we had large county recreation centers that we were able to use, where a number of the other counties across the state we're voting in libraries or facilities that maybe weren't quite as well accustomed or able to handle the sort of volume of individuals that we were dealing with. Secondly, our emphasis on the poll worker training. Leslie, I think, has stepped out, but she deserves a lot of credit for the team that she oversees. They are very dedicated to having multiple trainers in every class, really taking advantage of that to have hands-on training, to really kind of screen out the individuals who are maybe not up to the task that is before them, and to really sort of track the data on these individuals and who we're not hiring back for the next election. Dedicating, so we're making the best use of the personnel that we had. We're working hard toward that goal. Dedicated resources to early voting. We threw resources at early voting disproportionately to what other counties in the state had done. We had 30 to 35 DREs and 5 to 10 electronic poll books at each early voting site, which was, I don't remember what the state's guidance was, but it was something more along the lines of 10 or 8 or 10, maybe a third of the number of DREs that we deployed to those sites, plus of course the staff to accommodate that.
May I question that?
Sure.
You're saying these numbers, this amount of equipment and this number of people is going to be the same at every site?
No, and it wasn't.
Oh,
It's not.
okay.
This
I'm
is
not reading it right.
2012.
We had between 30 and 35 DREs and between 5 and 10 electronic poll books at each of the sites in 2012. This was looking backwards at, recognizing we still had wait times that were over the half an hour, which is the Presidential Commission's, mark, but what the pieces were that we thought were the reasons why our wait times were shorter than other counties. That we targeted the resources we had, not just based on some sort of a population-based formula, but based on our actual experience with the use of equipment. It mentions this floppy status report. Margaret had a report that we used to run out of the old system that would tell us exactly how many voters voted on each unit. And if we had, deployed 8 units, but we only got votes on 6 of them, and they didn't use the other 2, then she could eyeball that those 2 units were potentially up for grabs to be deployed somewhere else, if that was, what the nature of the room. Just digging in at the precinct level on the data that we had available. And of course then targeting those resources to the nuanced things that don't show up in a formula necessarily super well, but if we have a known assisted living facility in that precinct, a concentration of older voters or voters with minority language or other needs. The last bullet point is really there to support a discussion we were having at the time, because a lot of the focus was on the role of long ballot lengths in causing long lines. And so that's a talking point that was talking about what, did that or didn't that mitigate that we did have a high level of voter awareness of both the ballot questions, at least relatively speaking, and that we did have the sample ballot out to all households. That's literally just taking a slide that's about 3 years old and giving a snapshot of what our thoughts were at the time, and now Margaret's going to sort of adjust that to where our heads are now on these same issues.
So what are we doing to address the lines and address functionality? We still have the good facilities. We still have the county and city rep. We have police and fire and rescue. We have the continued emphasis on the training of the poll workers. We have multiple trainers. We're continuing our aggressive screening and evaluation of the poll workers. In early voting, we are dedicating 8 to 16 check-in stations based on previous behavior and kind of working off of the old floppy status report. Then we have 16 to 42 voting booths, and in the general election, ballot marking devices to be utilized, and each of the locations for the primary will also have 6 to 12 seated voting areas so that there'll never be any choke point with regards to being able to vote on a location. We'll have 16 to 24 workers, 1 greeter plus 2 staff members at each site at all times. We'll have designated at least 2 check-in stations for extra special needs voters, and staff and trainers are going to be focused on moving the process along efficiently. We also, for election day, we were required by the state board to survey all of our polling locations. We're also adding 3 seated voting stations to supplement the voting booths. And that additional information will be going to the chief judges in the latter part of March. We are deploying all of our EPBs and to increase the number of voting assistants to help manage the optical scanner, which we see as another choke point. Also, we've designed what we believe is a better secrecy sleeve and requires the voter not to have to kind of fumble through that process. And then, again, we looked at elderly population, group housing, concentration of older voters, minority. Also, sample ballot to all the households with information about the new equipment and other voting opportunities, such as vote by mail, early voting, and then outreach events since September of 2015 to educate voters. This kind of comes from the same 2012 presentation you went.
Sure. Yeah, we got 2 more flashback slides here. One,
Hurricane Sandy.
and yeah, I think what this really just sort of illustrates is the lack of good, solid data we have to build from. This is really what we have in terms of our metrics for what early voting turnout looked like in that presidential general election in 2012. Now, obviously, you remember that Monday and Tuesday we were closed for early voting, and then that last day was the extended day. What you do see, I mean, we all know that we just had lines everywhere throughout early voting in that election. And so what this is really a measurement of is not voter interest, it's a measure of processing capacity. So we had shorter hours for voting on Sunday than we had on Saturday. So you see the number of voters we were able to process at each site the first day of early voting, and then you see the reduced number of voters we were able to process because we had shorter hours on Sunday. Then you see by the time we got through Hurricane Sandy, and we did deploy some additional resources in terms of the poll books, and then I think the hours were extended as well once we reopened on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So, you know, you can see what the, I mean, I guess the lines must have lightened a little bit on Thursday because we did have that dip in the turnout. But, I mean, what we have is metrics on how fast we were able to process voters, not really metrics so much on voter interest during that period. And then this is just an illustration. When you look at, you know, we have a date stamp, a time stamp, when every voter checks in at that poll book. So we are able to run some charts. The state was able to help us pull this data and look at it. And this is really heavily across the county. Every precinct varies somewhat, of course. But this is the average hourly turnout by precinct that you see. We have a heavy pattern of voters showing up first thing in the morning, a much lighter turnout really through the rest of the day. And that's pretty consistent across the county, and that then leads into where Margaret's going to talk about how we're looking at these tools that the Presidential Commission and others are putting out to help you analyze that data and decide what to do with it.
So basically, obviously we've had the experience of the 2012 general election, so we have our lessons learned. Plus there's been at least 2-3 critical academic studies, Presidential Commission on Election Administration and the Pew Foundation helped fund some tools that Allison and I have been using to determine how we're going to supply for the various polling places and early voting. There's a poll worker and machine tool, line and poll worker management tool, line management tool. We also look at the precinct voter history, historical data from the State Board of Elections, and then some Section 203 adjustments. And mostly what that means is we're looking at census data. So basically, the SBE formula is pretty straightforward. The equipment is pretty finite. Every precinct receives one DS200 digital scanner per expected 3,000 voters. We have 47 DS200s to address additional needs. We have one ballot marking device per precinct. one EPB per 800 voters and a minimum of two EPBs per polling place. So what you can't read here is there's a formula that the state has historically used, and that is you 1,000 registered voters. The expected turnout would be approximately 800 voters. Then the state's formula says that you anticipate that 20% of them, or 0.8, are going to vote either by mail or early voting. So that says there's 640 potential individuals that you will serve on election day. That means there's 640 voters, so there's one optical scan, 2 poll books, and 1 ADA ballot marking device. So what do we do with regards to that formula? The state board, by regulation, has to consult with the local board staff. The local board staff reviews their allocation and requests adjustments based on additional information. Local board staff must meet the state's minimum requirements, and one of those minimum requirements is each precinct has to have 4 election judges, including the chief, with 1 scanner, 1 ADA voting unit, and 2 poll books. So using this information, I just wanted to give you an example. 1371 Leisure World has 2,016 voters. So if you multiply that by 80%, 1613, multiply that by 80%, 1290. So divide that by 3,000, that's 1 optical scanner, 2 poll books. But the staff would recommend in this particular case that you add a scanner because you have a high elderly population. You would add an additional ballot marking device because you're going to have individuals that have issues with regards to a palsy or maybe a vision issue. We would add additional poll books. We want 4 poll books there. We would make sure that we have additional magnifying glasses for the paper ballots. We would add additional voting operations judges for assistance to the voters. And we, in this particular case, we're going to have staffing for setup and closing process. So that's pretty much the story on the equipment allocation.
I have received a request for to bring before the board to see if we could have a wheelchair at, well, the request originally came that they were suggesting a wheelchair at every voting location.
Early?
Originally started just every one period. And I suggested that what I'd like to do is bring before the board the suggestion of having one at every early voting site to see, you know, what the need is, if we could get wheelchairs, at least that way we're only talking 10 of them, and as a sort of trial situation. But
we certainly can, this is the type of request that we can send to the State Board of Elections to ask them to use HAVA funds for the ADA and see what they say. But that is not something we have budgeted for.
Well, I understand that.
You know, so we're certainly, Margie will check into finding out what it would cost to rent wheelchairs.
Well, I'm wondering if there may be some organizations that could
most
help.
Methodist churches have, I don't know what we call them, first aid rooms, whatever, where people have, and like my church, Chevy Chase Methodist, one's a voting place, has 2 or 3 wheelchairs and walkers and all that stuff that they lend to the congregation whenever they want them. Availability is not going to be a problem. They're all over the place. My problem that came up when you said that immediately was liability. That we would want to make sure that the wheelchairs were in perfect order, that there was somebody that was transferring the person into it and pushing them was somebody that knew what they were doing, that there weren't any little things to go over in the doorways. That's what the first thing that came to my mind. So if it was ADA, you transfer the liability to them.
But the other piece is transportation. How do you get that many wheelchairs from point A to point B? And when would that happen?
Well, a lot
So
of them
we
get
would,
their car.
because we would be taking them over a Sunday, Saturday and Sunday, when
When
a
the
lot of
church might
services
want them.
might not.
That wouldn't matter at my church, but
Pardon me?
How the wheelchair person is getting to the polling place?
I have no idea.
You know, they
I have
to
no
get
idea.
there.
Well, they may use a walker, but it may be that the distance we're talking about from their vehicle to the polls may be longer than they would be comfortable walking.
I know we had it an instance at the early voting center in Silver Spring where there was a long line and there were
Yes.
two people on crutches. And one of them was an older person, and they asked if we had
We
had a
will have
wheelchair.
greeters. We will have greeters at
And
the
who can get
10
chairs? Who
that
can get
can-
chairs?
Well,
Right.
in the case of Silver Spring, I think what you're saying, we were trying to bring them inside where we had
Right.
an area where they could
So
sit,
what-
but it would be to wheel them in there. It's
Right.
a long distance.
Right.
When
Well,
you
it
get
was
a
mainly
line.
not waiting in line, and I think what I did was there was some signs, like there was a handicap sign that somebody holds, like that the person who's in front of them, or so that way they know that that's where they were in line, and people don't think the person's cutting in, but they hold a place for them. I know we done that in Clarksburg too. When I had the precinct in Clarksburg, we had a lot of elderly individuals who came with their walkers and so on, and we just gave them a sign to hold, and we had chairs facing, and they just waited in line until they came up and they were closer. But I know the schools have wheelchairs. A lot of these places have
I
wheelchairs.
really go back to, it's a grand idea, and it'd be lovely if we had them. Is the mic on? Then, but I do think ADA is the place to go and see if they'll provide them for us, and whatever personnel and whatever happens. I just don't see how we could have that as part of something that we do.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
just want to ask operationally so I understand so what the state tells us is the appropriate way to handle this situation is that we are supposed to have seating available where someone can get into the room, sit down, and give the sign to the person in line, just like Gracie described. Is the suggestion for wheelchairs coming from a direction of someone maybe not knowing that is the way we're supposed to handle it, and that this would be, was there a location where we didn't have enough seating, that wasn't working properly, that we didn't have enough runners communicating it, and
No,
so
I
they felt they
think
needed
it's
those chairs?
physically getting them in, being able to go to their car wherever they're disembarking and getting them into the voting place.
Distance from the parking to the early voting center.
Yes, in some place, isn't it in Virginia where they'll take the ballot out to their car?
They will.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true, but that's not the law in Maryland.
I understand that, but hence the difference here,
Alternatively to ADA doing it, that would be my strong suggestion in any case, that we have one place that's advertised as having a wheelchair, that we have it at one voting place only.
That would be a problem, I think.
Early
right?
voting. Well,
if you had
it's going to be a problem in any case.
No, but I'm
I've
saying
lived with people
more of
in
a legal
wheelchairs and
problem
wheelchairs in
if
my
you
car.
just provide it in one place
Taking
and not
them in and
provide
out.
it at the others.
Wasn't someone who might need one most likely to already have one when they get
Yes, yes.
Well, not necessarily.
Well, in these two cases, neither person had a wheelchair because they had broken.
I think one of the things that we're going to have to find out is, besides having the state pick up the cost of renting these, is who would be responsible for getting the chair out to whoever is out there, and then getting the chair back in, and then getting the chair into the facility, and then getting the chair after they're done with it, making sure, because the election, remember, our judges can't leave the room.
Right. Who gets to use it? That's my point. Who takes the chair back and forth in and out of the voting place. And we can't ask any of our people to help these people out of a car.
Well, the students could help push it,
But they're
but they
minors.
could not help.
But there's a liability.
Well, exactly. It really
Okay.
needs to be, presumably, these people would come with somebody.
Well, the way-
But they might not have a wheelchair.
The way they do it at malls, for example, right? If you have an elderly person, you want to go to Montgomery Mall, for example, right? You go, you get the wheelchair, they keep your license, your driver's license, and then you wheel the person around, you put them back where they belong in their car, you come back and you get your license back and they get their wheelchair back. That's usually how, in a lot of malls, that's how it's
But
done.
you envision what Mary Ann's saying. They come with someone. If someone's brought them there, you
Right.
just give them the wheelchair and you
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
You can use it.
You
until
hope they
you're done.
don't drive off with it, I guess.
Well, or you can give someone the responsibility of collecting the wheelchair without the person. Like you could have a student be there to wheel it back in.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's ways of doing it. I guess the question,
I just find it sounds like a nightmare.
I guess the question for me, Kevin, is if someone were to come to one of our polling places who needed, who was incapacitated physically to go in to vote, what would our responsibility be to provide that service?
Let me ask you
I
this.
don't
When
think
we take a provisional
I don't think
ballot
we
out
have
of the
one
car-
now.
I'm just asking, like, what would be the
I mean,
legal...
I was asked at Silver Spring during that.
I was asked
'cause,
too.
You remember those lines were 2 hours
I was
long.
asked to, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I mean, there's not an obligation to provide a wheelchair, but
Because
No,
it is
it's
a
not,
public, it is a
but
public
it's service.
facility.
But
Could
there's an
we
obligation
inquire and see?
It's worth asking.
There's an obligation to
Yeah.
accommodate the handicap.
right.
There is an obligation
Right.
to, and all of our polling places and early voting centers do meet ADA standards as set by the State Board of Elections. So that piece is in place. Additionally, there is vote by mail. That's certainly an option that the voter has also. But no, we don't bring ballots to the curb. And, I'll certainly check. I'm going to say two things. Number one, I'll definitely call the state tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. And ask them if there's funds available to rent 10 wheelchairs. But I'm also going to have to talk to the county attorney because this is going to be a liability risk issue. And so I'm going to need that individual to weigh in. And then after that, we'll see what Mr. Hanson has to say. Maybe we should call him.
Well, but we should be looking at the scenario that we're talking about where somebody else assists them and they just need the wheelchair. Because there's going to be a number of people who come to the polls who may, under ordinary
No,
circumstances...
you're talking polls, not. I'm not ordering
Early voting centers.
early voting.
centers, okay.
But think of the Montgomery County Executive Building. I would think that's an area where we certainly would have a need for it.
There's a drop-off at the lower level that you can walk across the cafeteria, take the elevator straight up, and go straight into the lobby.
If you walk with a
But
walker,
you
that's
have
a
to
long
walk. It's again.
That bottom one is
if,
the worst because
if
there's
we
no
had the
direct
situation
access
of a wheelchair being able to be brought down.
unless you go through the circuit court.
If you ask and it's a no-go, then, it's worth
You may
asking.
want to check with the county too. The county may be able to lend you 10 wheelchairs.
Well, we should say like the Civic Center has one, and the Rec Center in Germantown has one. A lot of these places that we're renting already, they already have one. I'm sure the fire department has one.
We can certainly work with Chris and the various facilities and just go from there.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Early voting,
That's a good
are there
idea.
some
Thank you.
early voting facilities that are much easier to get into than others?
Yeah, Germantown would be pretty
Did
quick.
we do the paper ballot?
I'm pretty sure we'll get here too.
We haven't done
Fraser
yet.
would be good.
Why
Okay.
not- Why not mark that on
We
the
haven't done
ballot?
it. Where is it?
Yeah, we're going to talk about
No,
that
wait,
now.
I added-
Is there anything else?
Well, I added the
Paper
paper
ballot.
ballot allocation. Is there anything?
I have nothing to tell you about paper ballot allocation because I'm waiting for the state to get us information.
Do we have input into it like we did for the equipment?
I hope so. There's nothing absolutely nothing that the state has provided us.
Okay.
The only thing that I have is that I've talked to the printer. I know what the weight of the paper is.
Okay.
I know that the stub for Republicans is going to be in red. The stub for the Democrats is blue. And the stub for the non-affiliated is green. Aside from that, and I know it's a one-page ballot. That's all I got.
One page?
One page.
With all
And if we get to Allison, you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, we got like 40 delegates. Even with the delegates to the conventions.
So, I guess let's segue then.
This is
The sample ballot. Here, let me hold on to my copy here, and let me share this.
I know.
It's going to be over by
This is
now.
what
It's going to be over.
I know.
Soon.
Huh? You
It's going
think?
to be over very.
Really?
Yeah. No, people, it's
There's a significant number of changes from the previous version you saw to this version, largely because of the state's decision to take those, to deploy the paper ballots to early voting. We had, as you'll recall, the structure of it was once set up that we were going to have all those screenshots showing up in an early voting section of the sample ballot, and then we were going to have the paper sample ballot show up in an election day part. So reconfiguring that things didn't make sense in the order that they flowed before. We've changed it up. The good news is that now that we know that the ballot is going to be double-sided, single card, 17 inches, we are able to actually print this at the contracted page length. Our contract calls for a 24-page sample ballot, and we can do that in 12 pages of English and 12 pages of Spanish with the double-sided ballot. So that was good news. We had a number of edits that you all recommended, and we've incorporated, I believe, all of them. With the exception, I noted one, David, you had asked that we add some date information onto the back cover for the voting by mail section, and I missed that, so I'm going to go back and add that. There's also one thing here that we did not incorporate, and I kind of want to throw it out there for all of you. We have and David had raised this at the last meeting, that how we communicate the vote by mail piece. We do say postmark it by election day, so we do use language that is specific to the Postal Service. But there was a staff concern that if we did the sort of interim compromise that had been suggested of changing all of our references to the mail to U.S. mail, that might then sort of discourage people from thinking that they could use FedEx or UPS or as our staff pointed out, a really strong number of these ballots are at the nursing homes or in person here, which is where the language becomes absentee. But we did not include the recommendation to change it to a consistent reference to U.S. mail, at least at this point. We moved the sample ballot up to the front rather than to the end. We still we have the actual absentee ballot application inside that you can cut out. We're waiting for a final go-ahead from the state that we're permitted to do that, but that's how we want to do it.
I love that.
And then we have on the page, with this number of pages, we would have what we would normally print as this page intentionally left blank in between the English and the Spanish, because we have the back cover that is the 12th page in the Spanish. And so what we've decided to do is to include an election worker application on that extra page, which since all of our election workers need to be able to read in English, but we do have the one question that is in Spanish that asks if you read, write, and speak the English language, that we can get away with only having that on the English language part, but in a part that is facing the Spanish language section so that everyone would see it. And we also have an addition here on the very back cover, bouncing back and forth, and Margaret had actually flagged to me an envelope that we saw that was coming from a federal agency that had a checkbox here if the recipient is deceased. And so we lifted that and figured we'd give a whirl to, if they're not at this address, also check here and drop it in the mailbox. We haven't gotten a final go-ahead from the Postal Service that works yet, but we think it will be, we think it'll pass
Oh,
muster.
that is a gem strike. I mean, that goes far to what we've been trying to get people
Exactly,
to do.
that's very good.
Yeah.
I thought the delegates had the presidential candidate next to their name.
Yeah, this was.
Well, I, you know, maybe I should have even included that. I included it so that you could see it, so that you could get the general
This is just a-
feel. In fact, if you look close, I think it says Prince George's County. It's a super early version.
Please keep in mind that what you're seeing is we forced the state to give us something.
Right.
So that, because we had to find out if we laid this ballot out, how many pages we had, and where we were, you know, what we needed to do. So that is why, you know, it is the way it is.
Because someone capitalized someone.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, does
We,
the capital
we
letters don't
haven't
have any
proved,
significance either?
as I said,
Okay.
we haven't seen it.
Okay.
We haven't
Okay.
proved it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, don't
the
get too mad at
candidate's
the
name's
state
on
for
it.
giving us the very first export report.
Capitalized.
Concerning the point about the mail,
Yeah.
would it be possible somehow, somewhere, to just let people know that they have various options? Because we're already saying voting by mail, so that really, the in-person issue that you mentioned is already kind of
Yeah, our
an
absentee staff
issue.
wants the word absentee rather than vote by mail. That's why I mentioned
Right.
it.
Well,
Right.
or if there's some way to put both in, or something. But I am concerned that there is a category of people who don't necessarily understand postmarks, if we could address it another way, I'm fine by that.
What else do you call
with
it?
language on this page that kind of.
Which page are you looking at?
It would
Voting
be
by mail.
this
Voting by mail
page,
page.
voting by mail page, and
Voting
where
by
the
mail, yeah.
application is.
In that,
There are instructions that do come with the blank ballot.
we could squish that and add some more
Yeah.
text. Squish the top part,
But-
make some more room.
Just so you know, I mean, once we get this ballot, you need to understand that, of course, we have the 7 ballot styles, the Democratic, Republican, and the non-affiliate, but we also have to prove, obviously, the paper ballot. We still have to do the ballot marking device because that's the ADA. We have the fax ballot or the overseas email ballot, and we have the audio ballot that has to be done, and both of them, all of them in English and Spanish. So once we get, and March 11th, I believe, is the day that it starts going out to the overseas. So anything you have to say about this sample ballot voter guide needs to be said today, because once we start and we get everything signed off on, it's going to go to the printer.
I think
You gotta look at the candidate.
I
Look at the
think
candidate.
it's adequate.
Well,
I think it's all the
the
information
candidate
there.
list is that's a
have the
very
tabs in it.
informal.
Oh.
We will officially
This-
receive it tomorrow. That's just the general idea.
We just needed something
We're
to
gonna
give
we're
you.
gonna start translating the Spanish version of this tomorrow. So anything we change after tomorrow, we have to redo.
Okay.
You know, in order to.
I was going to my question if you had it in Spanish.
Not yet. We're waiting until we finalize the English.
Okay. When you do, can you send it to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, see?
I know.
Good job. Very, very good job.
Oh, I like it a lot. I think it's very user-friendly.
Yeah,
Well, it's not just me.
user-friendly.
Gilberto had a big input on
Whatever.
the order thing.
Thank you both.
Several people.
Whatever.
Can I use this? Can I give this to somebody? Can I pull this out of here? Take it home and give it to somebody? Somebody asked me for one today.
What?
She wants to take the application.
To fill it out?
Oh, I had people ask me for them today.
Just tell them to go to our online.
I did.
You
That's what I
can't
told them.
believe the people. It's like, I gotta get those registration forms before I leave here today.
They were in your file folder.
Huh?
Lisa, Lisa, did you not give Marianne those photo registration forms? They're in there.
In there?
In her folder.
Oh, good.
Did we all get them or she got them?
She asked for them, so I
I need
got
some
it.
voters.
Right, they're right there. There.
Paper clip.
Paperclip right there.
On this
Clear it.
Perfect, perfect.
I'm just trying to make sense of the sentence.
So I think we're on to new business.
That's it, yes, new business.
Well, bylaws we covered.
Yes,
Right,
we
no.
did.
Cannot be returned.
So the last item, well, unless somebody has anything else.
Oh, let me see.
Last, yeah, Gracie, David, last item is, I forgot to put it in specific. Last meeting, we talked about, do we want to have a night meeting in March? And that was the last item for tonight. So I
I'm
just-
against it.
This
The
is a
staff
night
already
meeting.
busy. Yeah, the staff is already busy.
Technically, this is a night meeting.
Yeah, really, thank you.
Imagine a night meeting will be going into the
May
AM.
I suggest, because the election's coming up and the staff is working so hard, and it does take a lot of staff time, that we put off an evening meeting till fall and discuss it again then about perhaps if we want to do that and do a little more than just a regular meeting, whatever that might be.
Can
That
I
we wait
suggest that we
until-
take your suggestion but commit to doing it instead of discussing it again for the third time?
Well, that's up to everybody.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
think this isn't the time as far as the staff's concerned.
I don't have a problem with that, but I would like us to do an evening meeting. I think that the voters don't get an opportunity to come on Monday afternoons is hard enough for us. And I think that it would be good to have one at a time that's more convenient for people to come.
Yeah,
After
then
the
the middle
elections.
of the winter,
Okay.
which the night comes.
So we'll put it on our agenda when?
After the election.
Yeah, that-
You mean after the primary?
No.
Oh, you want to,
Well, I mean, the staff's not going to be any less busy.
then it won't
Well-
be this year, because
Right.
we'll be counting ballots into December.
Right.
How about June?
June next year?
No.
Is that what you're thinking?
No, June
Oh.
2016. We're going to be in between.
So let's put it
It'll
on
be
the-
plenty of time before November. Plenty of time. It'll be after the canvas.
So you want to put it on the May agenda?
You mean the May 16th?
Let's put it on the
What about
agenda
you?
for May.
How do you find
If
your
you wait
I,
until
we're
then,
going to
you
be
can't
dealing
plan.
with an awful
April?
lot of follow-up to the election in June. Won't we, at that meeting, there'll
Yeah.
be a lot of,
Then it'll be exciting for people to come.
I was going to say, and then you also get plenty of feedback from people about what transpired.
But what about all the overtime we're going to have to pay?
Yeah.
to Keep staff here, that's a lot of money.
It'll be for one meeting,
Yeah, still.
right? Well, it'll be in the name of transparency for the public.
We have it on, they can sit down their home and listen to our conversation.
Right. They can.
And they can call you.
It is not the
anytime.
same as being able to come to one of our meetings. We usually have, a handful of people who are here on Monday afternoons. This would be an opportunity for more than a handful of people to come. But if you wait until May to decide to do it in June, then it makes it even less likely that people
So
would
when,
come.
you want to put this on, which meeting agenda do we want to put this on?
Well,
Is
I'm
the
for not doing
purpose
it
of,
till after the election.
is this the purpose to set the meeting for, what,
Yeah,
6,
I want
7,
clarity.
8 o'clock at night
Oh, no.
on July?
Marion,
Is that what you're saying?
4.5
Nobody's gonna come.
that. That's
nobody
ridiculous.
will come.
Nobody's gonna
People
come.
Go home and they're tired.
In July at 7 o'clock meeting at the. You would come to a meeting? of
what,
the-
in July?
Yeah.
No, I'm having trouble getting my arms around this one, to tell you the truth. Just because I'm worried about with the election and getting ready for the general and the thing. I mean, I am just worried about it.
why
I
I'm
like the
suggesting
idea. I like it so much, as you know. I tried to hold
I'd like it for
an
next year.
off-site meeting, but I'm almost thinking we
So
are.
it doesn't seem like there's a consensus to have it before the election.
The general election,
That's what it seems like.
Correct.
Correct.
okay.
So we'll table the discussion, I guess.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to table it forever, but I don't think we,
For
you know,
time being.
moved on it probably soon enough to not be affected by what we're trying to do to get these elections run.
Okay, then, staff sent you in your advance packet a description of the specific duties that are tied to the election,
Right.
or to these dates. If you have any questions about it, rather than keeping the
Yeah, I wanted-
anybody
yeah, I
here,
wanted to raise
call
that.
me, and I will talk to
In the
you.
past, what did the board have, like set times? Did we have like a schedule?
Yes, Margie has a
Like
schedule.
Jim, Silver Spring, 8 to 11,
Oh,
Alex.
he's talking about early voting.
I mean, all, you know,
Yeah.
all the,
We're talking more about
In-
the campus.
In terms of the early voting centers, what we've done in the past is each board member has selected an early voting center, and that has been their assigned location.
You have to be
with-
there for the first 2 hours.
And for
okay,
the
well,
last.
yeah.
Okay, so we can do
That's
that.
fine.
We can do that next month. In terms of the canvas, I do put out a request. Probably, let's see, the election's in April. Probably early April, I'll put out an email to everybody that will ask you to tell me what days you're available.
Okay.
Then I'll compile a little chart and
Good.
send it
Okay.
out
That's
so
what
that
I want.
everybody knows who's supposed to be here on what days.
Kevin, if you and I could chat, I do believe that we need to have 4 people for the canvas, and I can show you on what that's based. And I certainly will do everything I can to be here for as much of the time as possible, because I know that the more we're here, the faster it goes.
Well, and in fact, we were criticized at the last election when, at the opening of the meeting, which was a time that we thought we could, there's a little bit of dead time that comes into these things, and I know those of us who work find it frustrating, but this is the major part of our job, and this is the most major commitment, and it's really important to have all hands on board.
Just so you know, the reason I gave you the absentee numbers today and told you out of that 4,000, 2,000 plus were email or fax ballots, that's because the very first thing that you're going to be able to do is all we do is duplicate ballots.
Yeah.
We have nothing else that we can do.
Right, but by law, that has to be done under our supervision.
Yes, that's correct. And all I'm saying to you is that you're just going to sit there and watch people duplicate ballots.
Or we're going to duplicate them ourselves.
But I
Well,
understand
maybe not.
we get an extra stipend for this?
Yes, you do.
Yes.
No, Mary
Yeah.
said it was 500. So
Yes.
It's
Oh,
5?
I'm sorry.
It's 500?
After the completion of the canvas, we'll request that be added to a paycheck for you.
I'm sure it'll make all the difference.
Don't spend it in one place.
Right.
But you're not suggesting that people don't need to be there.
No.
Oh, when
I'm
you were
just-
saying
You just
about
say, you just say to expect boredom.
I am just telling you that when, between the reports that we're required to do and the duplicated ballots, you're just going to sit there, it's going to be like watching paint
Now,
dry.
do we have to duplicate all the ballots with the new ballot system, with the paper ballots? We still have to duplicate them?
Yeah.
The electronic mail,
All the electronic.
No, it's,
Well, there's a
What are you
question
really
about
trying
that.
to say to me?
The state board has said something about that. Let me, canvas stuff is going to be done in March, and I will find out the specifics.
Did anybody warn Jessica about the length of our meeting?
Okay.
All right.
So we're adjourned?
You guys will give us a motion.
I move to adjourn.
second?
All those in favor? Aye.
Oh, we don't have
No
an
one opposed.
executive